opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prisons? I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat.
Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, it's 3 p.m, it's Patrick Christys, it's GB News, and we are back with a bang this Monday. Here's what's on the agenda. 2 more migrant barges. As Rishi Sunak says, this is what success looks like in terms of stopping the boats. We've got asylum seekers refusing accommodation outside hotels, no deportation flights. The bill from the taxpayer is going through the roof. I don't think this is what winning looks like. In other news, talking of losers, Harry's no show at court today. Yes, he's managed to anger the judge and his own legal team in the phone hacking case. We are analysing exactly what this means for the print. And also lockdowns. A lot of people feeling vindicated today, OK? Lockdown causing more harm than good. That's what the report appears to be saying. Do you feel vindicated? Never again, I think, appears to be the message. And finally, did you see this morning? And the award for the best actress goes to, yes, Holly Willoughby, sitting on a sofa, similar sofa to the one that Philip Schofield, of course, came out as gay on, saying that, well, look, of course, we didn't know anything and we were all lied to. What do you make of that? Patrick Christys on GB News. Emails thick and fast, gbviews@gbnews.com. Do you feel lied to by Rishi Sunak over migration? We're going to get stuck right into that after your headlines.
Cheers, Patrick. I'm Rory Smith in the GB Newsroom. The Prime Minister says his plan on tackling small boats and asylum backlog is starting to work, but admits there is still a long way to go. During a speech in Kent, the Prime Minister said small boat crossings were down by 20%. Rishi Sunak also announced a further 2 barges to accommodate another 1,000 people, but would not comment on where they'd be located. The PM says the government is using every tool at their disposal to tackle illegal migration.
We've now returned 1,800 to Albania in just 6 months. We've gone from accepting around 1 in 5 Albanian asylum cases to now just 1 in 50, in line with our European partners. And what is the result of all of this? Well, so far this year, the number of Albanian small boat arrivals has fallen by almost 90%.
Well, Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer welcomed the news, but says the government still needs to secure more returns agreements with other countries.
I think everybody wants to make sure that we stop the boats. We don't want people making that dangerous journey. All we've really had from the government, though, is the announcement of a policy that doesn't work, then the re-announcement of the same policy, essentially. And it often feels, I think, like Groundhog Day. And meanwhile, that's costing a fortune for the taxpayer. And there's this growing sense of frustration. I mean, I'm at Hinkley Point C here today. Fantastic project. It's behind schedule, and there's a frustration here.
In other news this afternoon, thousands of British Airways and Boots employees are among those who have had their personal data breached following a cyber attack. BA says their staff were among those hit by the attack on Zealous. That's a payroll provider used by hundreds of companies in Britain. Pharmacy group Boots also said the attack had included some of its employees' personal details. It includes names, addresses and banking details. The judge hearing the case of Prince Harry against Mirror Group newspaper says he was surprised the Duke did not attend the High Court today. It was previously thought Prince Harry would attend to give evidence over claims that the newspaper articles contained information that were gathered using unlawful methods. But it's now been confirmed he will enter the witness box tomorrow to give that evidence. Mirror Group Newspapers is contesting the claims. An inquest into the deaths of 2 young people at Bournemouth Beach found they died of drowning. 17-year-old Joe Abbas and 12-year-old Suna Khan were rescued from the sea during the incident last Wednesday, but both later died in hospital. Dorset Police says the beach was extremely busy at the time and they continue to appeal for witnesses to come forward. Holly Willoughby has returned to the This Morning sofa for the first time following Philip Schofield's exit. Opening the show today alongside Josie Gibson, she said she felt shaken, troubled and let down by Schofield after he admitted to an affair with a young male employee. She also said she wants to get the show back to the warmth and magic that it usually brings.
You, me and all of us at This Morning gave our love and support to someone who was not telling the truth, who acted in a way that they themselves felt that they had to resign from ITV and step down from a career that they loved. That is a lot to process. And it's equally hard to see the toll that it's taken on their own mental health. I think what unites us all now is a desire to heal for the health and well-being of everyone.
Ofcom won't be taking action after Adjoa Ando said the Buckingham Palace balcony was terribly white during ITV's coverage of the coronation. The watchdog says the comment made by the actress was a personal observation, which is part of a wide-ranging panel discussion. Well, Ofcom also says it takes into account guests' right to freedom of expression. An anti-vaccine conspiracy theorist has been sentenced to 12 months in prison for plotting to destroy 5G masts. 59-year-old Christys Gresson discussed getting rid of the mobile phone masts after becoming obsessed with the belief that they were linked to COVID-19 vaccine. Well, meanwhile, her co-defendant, Darren Reynolds, was jailed for 12 years after being found guilty of 8 terrorist offences. It's GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens now, though. Back to Patrick.
Yeah, we're back with a bang this Monday, and I'm going in on this. Rishi Sunak claims his Stop the Boats policy is working, but it isn't. He's massaging more figures than a woman in the back streets of Soho, if you ask me. Having to secure 2 new barges at the taxpayers' expense, which he announced today, isn't what winning looks like. Having asylum seekers put up in central London hotels, camping out on the streets because they don't like the conditions, isn't what winning looks like. He's claiming the Albanian return scheme has been a success. Well, at least 12,000 came across last year, and around 1,800 have been sent back. Many more have absconded. So the only thing they've returned to is a life of crime on the streets of Britain. He says boat crossings are down 20%. The French are stopping around 40% more people than they did last year. Well, OK, but that's cost us hundreds of millions of pounds. And the wind is blowing in the wrong direction, and that appears to be the main reason fewer people are actually coming over. Saying Albanian boat crossings have fallen by 90% would be more of a triumph if we hadn't already let in so many of them to begin with. Rishi will not stop the boats until flights to Rwanda take off, or until people who refuse to stay in free, perfectly fine asylum seeker hotels are deported back to where they came from. Make no mistake, these people have travelled across 2 continents, and they've not been happy with the conditions anywhere. I will say it again, they are not asylum seekers, they are asylum shoppers. Rishi will also not stop the boats until we get processing sorted. All he's doing so far is adding to the backlog. More people lounging around in Britain on the taxpayers' expense, waiting for some wokey from the work-from-home office to get round to looking at their case file sometime next year. This is what the public actually need to see to believe that the Stop the Boats policies are working. This is what we need to see. Swerving the ECHR and getting Rwanda flights taking off. Less taxpayers' money being spent on asylum seeker hotels. Rapid processing and ultimately people in Calais packing up their tents and voluntarily heading back through Europe because they realise that Britain is no longer a soft touch. That is what stopping the boats look like. And that's not what we've got, is it? Well, that's what I think. A lot to get stuck into today on Rishi Sunak's big announcement. I want to hear from you, though. Email me, gbviews@gbnews.com. As I said a moment ago, Rishi Sunak claims his plan to tackle the small boats crisis is starting to work.
Today, I'd like to update you on the progress that the Home Secretary and I are making. And my message is this. Our plan is starting to work. Before I launched my plan in December, the number entering the UK illegally in small boats had more than quadrupled in 2 years. Now, some said this problem was insoluble, or just a fact of 21st century life. They'd lost faith in politicians to put in the hard yards to do something about it. And of course, we still have a long way to go. But in the 5 months since I launched the plan, crossings are now down 20% compared to last year. But we are not complacent because we know people smugglers are highly organised and will change their tactics if we let them. I will not rest until the boats are stopped. With grip and determination, the government can fix this, and we are using every tool at our disposal.
But I will reiterate, today it's announced that we can expect 2 new migrant barges. Exactly where they go remains a mystery. People aren't happy to have them anywhere for a variety of different reasons. How is our asylum seeker hotel bill doing? Shock horror, it's going up. We're having to build more social housing, not for people who are already here, but for asylum seekers and refugees. And we are yet to see any form of deterrent in the shape of a flight taking off. And, of course, we have ruled out turning the boats back. So it's all very well and good massaging these figures and saying the French are stopping more people, we're seeing fewer Albanians and we're seeing fewer boats coming across at the moment. But as I'm about to talk about with our Home and Security Editor, Mark White, who's in Dover, who I can go to now. Mark, there is an alternative explanation, is there not? An alternative explanation as to why we are seeing fewer boats crossing the Channel. And it's got more to do, I think, with weather than stopping the boats policies.
Yes, Patrick, all those that I speak to that have expert knowledge of the marine environment around here say the reduction in the number of people coming across in small boats has got very little to do with the tougher approach and everything to do with the prevailing weather conditions. The increase in wind, especially from the northwest, which has been causing trouble in the Channel really since October of last year. I've got a bit of video that I want to show you now that really is illustrative of this. We just captured this a few moments ago of a small boat making its way past the entrance to Dover Harbour, and you can see that that boat is being lashed by waves as it makes its way along the seafront there. And the wind conditions today are between 16 and 18 miles an hour. That is not a strong wind by any means, just tipping into moderate. But what that does, especially blowing from the direction it's blowing from, is it pushes against the tide and it pushes up the waves to over half a metre, which means for a small boat like that it's difficult enough to make its way across. But for these inflatables, very flimsy in nature of course, it's almost impossible to navigate anything that's over half a metre in height. And because the winds have not necessarily been raging at gale force since October, but they have been pretty persistently just above that sort of 12 to 15 miles an hour that make the seas impassable, then the people smugglers are not pushing their boats out because they know that the likelihood is the boat is either going to return to shore or is going to be picked up by the French because it gets into trouble. So when we get to a period where it's flat calm and not the kind of conditions even that we're seeing today, but actually proper flat calm conditions, we can expect that there will be very significant numbers of boats coming across, and the numbers pushing probably 1,000 on some of the very good days that we saw last year as well.
Yeah, absolutely, Mark. Rishi Sunak clearly trying to hail this as some sort of success. And Robert Jenrick was wheeled out to the press over the weekend, our immigration minister. He was saying, hey, look, we started to deport thousands of Albanians. Then he was corrected, and it was hundreds, and then it kind of settled around the 1,800 mark who've been flown back to Albania. But, of course, 12,000 came across last year, that we know of. And as far as we can gather, quite a few of those have absconded.
Yeah, well, it's potentially very dangerous to go down the road of, at this early stage, hailing success in this endeavour to stop the small boats. That very assertion could come back to bite them in the backside when we get into the summer and when we get into the flat calm conditions and when we get the very significant numbers of small boats coming across. I mean, you're right about the Albanian numbers. There were between 12 and 13,000 Albanians on the small boats last year. It's only 28 in the first quarter of this year, so it's significantly reduced. But it may be, of course, that those that did want to come came last year anyway and have no real intention, others, of coming across this year. We don't know what the fundamental reasons behind that are. It might be to do with the tougher policy of the British government. We don't know at this stage. And that might well have, further down the line, an impact on the overall total numbers towards the end of the year. But what it's not having an impact on are the numbers of boats. And the number of boats coming across, just forget the 7,500 people, but just the number of boats are down because they can't get into the water in the first place because of the weather conditions. Simple as.
Mark White, thank you very much. GB News' Home and Security editor, who will be discussing this throughout the course of the show. I am joined now, though, by Mark Davies, who's from the Refugee Council. Mark, thank you very much. It's great to have you on. The other breaking line today from Rishi Sunak was about two new migrant barges. We are yet to discover exactly where in the UK they will be plonked. What's your reaction to that?
Well, I mean, we don't agree with the idea of putting people on barges, and we sympathise with the communities that will be probably unhappy about it as well. It's not the way to treat people. It's not the way that British people want to treat people who've escaped trauma and really difficult circumstances in their home countries. And it's a direct result of the government's mismanagement of the asylum system. If it wasn't for the fact that there's a massive backlog of claims, as you've rightly pointed out, then we wouldn't be in a position where the government's scrabbling around trying to find places to put people. So I wholly agree with you.
Yeah, I think we have found a point of total agreement, which is on this backlog. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous, really, that we've got this amount of people just waiting 4 years. It's costing the taxpayer a huge amount of money. It is the main reason why we're seeing a lot of people in hotels. I suspect you and I may differ when it turns out whether or not what verdict we'd like given on the people who are on the backlog, but there we go. Also, Rishi Sunak was defending the idea of detaining initially child migrants, people claiming to be children coming across the channel. Do you think that's inhumane? Because he was saying we're going to do this because we want to deter people from just pushing children out into the channel and knowing that we will be able to take them.
I mean, it's totally inhumane. It's not fundamentally in line with British values, actually, Patrick. I think it's just something that most people in this country would find absolutely abhorrent, and it's a really horrendous thing. I mean, the fact is, and these are facts, unfortunately, from the Home Office's own statistics, that the vast majority of people who come across on the boats are genuine refugees. They're from places like Afghanistan, which is a place that we said where we'd help people as they escape.
Mark,
the Taliban.
I'm going to have to cut in there. I'm going to have to cut in there because this is a figure, Mark. This is a statistic that yourself and others like you do wheel out, but you say that in the same breath as the fact that we are not processing the vast majority of people coming over. So you don't know that. None of us know whether or not the majority of these are genuine asylum seekers at all, because we are processing so few of them. Can I ask you a bit about whether or not your cause is slightly undermined, given a new report from the International Rescue Committee, which appears to show that we are treating asylum seekers and refugees much better than our European friends, and whether or not you should be taking your fight to the European Union instead?
Well, I haven't seen that report. It's not really the case. I mean, actually, benefits for people seeking asylum are actually better in France, for instance. So I'd have to have a look at that report. But I think, I mean, you cut me off when I was talking about the. I understand why, of course, around the facts, and the facts are that when claims are processed, the vast majority of those claims are agreed, so 75% of all claims, and you're absolutely right that they should be processed much more quickly, absolutely, and we've got this absurd backlog. But that doesn't mean that people are twiddling their thumbs and not doing anything. In fact, when they are processing the claims, they're finding that people from these terrible countries, all these countries which are facing real problems, like Afghanistan, which, as I said, we promised that we'd step in and help people facing the Taliban and all the threats of that, and we've let those people down, those people who serve with the British military or supported the British military, and we're absolutely letting them down. Only 40 people have come under the government scheme from Afghanistan. It's extraordinary.
You mentioned the British military there, Mark, because I can guarantee you that there are people who fought in countries like Iraq and Afghanistan who would absolutely give their hind teeth to be put up free of charge at the taxpayers' expense in hotels in central London with bed and board. Hotels that have caused such outrage by these asylum seekers, some of whom have travelled across 2 continents, and if what you're saying is true, even swerved a better life, better benefits in countries like France in order to come over here and reside over here. I did say it before, I think a lot of these people are asylum shoppers, not asylum seekers. But can I ask you about the Refugee Council? Because there have been accusations levelled at a few groups which insinuate that you are basically aiding and abetting human trafficking, in the sense that you are providing support for people and in some way, albeit indirectly, encouraging people to make a dangerous journey across the Channel. How would you respond to that?
Well, it's a very serious charge, that, Patrick, and it's absolutely not the case at all. What we do is we provide services like therapy. We literally provide blankets and food for children, unaccompanied children who've taken an incredibly dangerous journey across the Channel. That's the kind of thing we do. We certainly don't encourage anybody. It's a horrendous thing for somebody to do that journey. It's really dangerous. If you take a look at there's a brilliant app, actually, if you want to download it, which shows all of the Channel shipping traffic. If taking that journey is an incredibly dangerous thing to do, and we would discourage anybody from doing that. We would also absolutely condemn wholeheartedly the people smugglers who make money out of this evil trade. They're basically making money out of people's misery, people who've escaped things that you and I would just find horrendous, and they should be treated in the same way that we treat people from Ukraine, because we've given 200,000 visas to people from Ukraine, and rightly so, but we don't seem to think that a house bombed in Syria or Iran or Sudan is the same as a house bombed in Ukraine, which seems really strange.
Well, I can understand that. I mean, having gone to report from the Syrian border and the Iraqi border myself, and speaking to people on migrant camps there in places like Turkey, they are actually dead keen to try to stay around the area there, and maybe a little bit more support in those areas. I mean, look, Mark, thank you very, very much.
Sorry, Patrick, quickly to say, most refugees do stay in the neighbouring area because obviously they want to go home as soon as they possibly can, and that's the reality. We talk a lot about refugees in this country, but actually we take far fewer refugees than the rest of the world.
But we are taking more economic migrants, Mark, aren't we? Because a lot of the people coming across the Channel now are actually from India, and we have a very, very good workable visa scheme with India, and it strongly indicates that those people do not match the economic criteria, which is quite easy, actually, in order to legally come here. So a lot of people coming over the Channel now are from India. Presumably you don't support that because they're not refugees, are they?
No, I mean, absolutely. It's really interesting that there's suddenly an increase in the number of Indians coming. That's absolutely right. And we don't know the reasons for it, but you're right.
Well, it's economic migration. We do know the reason.
Well, that's probably is. But I think it's really important to say that the vast majority, as proven by the Home Office statistics, come here because they are facing real trauma in their home countries. You're absolutely right about India. It's a really interesting question, isn't it? Just as it's a really interesting question about Albania. You've referenced that a lot as well. But what I think is really important is that we don't overlook the fact that obviously people are coming from places like Sudan, which was recently in the news, where their homes are being bombed and they're being forced out of the country, and they have really strong cases.
Look, Mark, thank you. Bit pressed for time, but thank you very, very much. Seriously, I did enjoy that. I hope to talk to you again. I really appreciate you coming on. It's Mark Davies there from the Refugee Council. Take care. All right, OK, so loads more on this story on our website, gbnews.com. You will find the best analysis, big opinion, all the latest breaking news as well. Now, Prince Harry, he was meant to be in court today, wasn't he? There's lots on our website about that as well. But guess what? He didn't bother turning up. Massive sense of entitlement. Supposedly he missed it because of his daughter's birthday. We've only had a year to plan that, Harry. Also, I think she's 2, so I'm not sure she would have missed you. And Patrick Christys on GB News, Britain's news channel.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Deebs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners on TV, radio and online. This is GB News. Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Well, in just a few moments' time, I will be discussing a devastating report that says that COVID lockdown was a massive mistake. Lots of people out there today feeling incredibly vindicated. And find out what Holly Willoughby had to say about Philip Schofield when she returned on this morning. I think the Best Actress award is going her way sometime soon. But now, For most of us, a court appearance is exactly that. You get suited and booted, put on your best behaviour and present yourself in a cordial fashion to the judge, who very often can decide your fate. Yes, I am talking from personal experience. But that wasn't the case for dear Prince Harry today. He was due to attend the High Court for the start of his case against the Daily Mirror Group, over alleged phone hacking. His lawyer said the Duke of Sussex was unable to attend because he was celebrating his daughter's birthday in the US yesterday and only managed to fly to the UK last night. He is due to appear tomorrow for a brutal cross-examination, which, of course, we will be all over. GB News' royal correspondent Cameron Walker is at the High Court for us today. No high drama at the High Court because he's not rocked up.
No, it was a no-show from Prince Harry, Patrick, and the judge said he was actually surprised that the Duke of Sussex was not here today because the judge in a previous day of this trial has essentially said he wanted all witnesses to be available the day before they were due to give evidence in case the opening arguments were cut short and therefore they had time to fill in the afternoon. But Andrew Green, the KC who's representing Mirror Group newspapers in this trial, he said he was deeply troubled that Prince Harry was not here today and said there is a potential for time to be wasted this afternoon, as in Monday afternoon, because Prince Harry is not there to give evidence in his trial. But this is very much a personal a case for Prince Harry. His lawyers argued today that he was subjected to unlawful activity from when he was at school, through the death of his mother, Princess Diana, army training, and of course into adulthood, and was also made the argument that there was no protection and no aspect of his life was saved from the unlawful information gathering of Mirror Group newspapers. That is the allegation. Mirror Group newspapers is contesting those particular claims. But he also made the point that details of the Duke's life are too good not to publish because the stories that they were generating were creating a lot of money for the newspaper group. But tomorrow, as you said, Patrick, Prince Harry is going to be here at the High Court. He will be cross-examined by the KC representing Mirror Group newspapers. It's not going to be a fluffy interview like he's used to with Oprah or indeed the promotional interviews he did with Spare. He could very much get a grilling from a KC judge, and we'll have to wait and see how he handles that.
Cameron, thank you. Our royal reporter Cameron Walker there. Royal commentator Michael Cole is with me in the studio. Let's deal with the no-show first, Michael. What do you make of that?
Starting off with a wigging from the judge is a very, very bad idea indeed. Turning up on time in life, or ahead of time, is a very good idea. The majesty of the law will not be insulted. And for the judge to say he was surprised, that is a very loaded word. He will not have liked that at all. This is a high-risk strategy by the Prince going into court. This is something nobody alive has ever seen, a member of the royal family in the witness box in a court case. Back in the 19th century, Queen Victoria was dismayed when the then Prince of Wales, her eldest child, went into the witness box in two notorious cases, one dealing with cheating at cards and the other with adultery. But it's never happened since then, 150 more years. And as Cameron was saying, it all turns around on cross-examination. You've covered high-profile cases, so have I. We've seen the whole thing turn around on a skilled cross-examination. Now, being in the witness box is not nothing. I've been a key witness, the key witness, in two High Court cases. And I was in the witness box for 2 days during the inquest into the deaths of Diana, Princess of Wales, and Dodi Al-Fayed. However well prepared you are, however well you know the subject, it is an ordeal. And I think Prince Harry will find himself being taken to places he doesn't want to go to. And that's quite legitimate. The KC, the King's Counsel for the Daily Mirror, they're heavily contesting these. They're looking at 33 cases, alleged cases, of illicit interference in his private life by various means. It started off with 144. That's a gross in the old-fashioned terminology. The judge has got that down to 33. And he's saying that his privacy was invaded and the privacy of his friends like Chelsea Davy, a former girlfriend, by means of hacking and blagging and paying paid investigators to breach his privacy. Now, the KC is going to listen to all that, but he's going to take Harry to places, perhaps when he wore a Nazi uniform, when he was playing strip pool in Las Vegas, all of that stuff.
And it remains to be seen whether or not Prince Harry really has the intellect to be able to deal with all of that. But you mentioned a previous court case from 1890, I believe, with that then Prince of Wales over a game of baccarat, I think it was, gambling. Now, this is a massive gamble for Harry, because if he's not got a no-win, no-fee lawyer, which I doubt he will, he could end up on the hook for a huge legal fee on all of this. From what I can gather, the Mirror Group can come out and say, we didn't hack your phone, we had it from anonymous tip-offs, and that is something that they may well be able to prove, if indeed they have to. But the judge can also say, potentially, you have pretty much exceeded your statute of limitations on this. You had around 7 years to bring this to court. You didn't do that. Your time's up, mate. And so, really, Harry is gambling here.
Yeah, I think these cases they're going to look at are not subject to time sensitivity. And you're quite right to say these instances are between 12 and 27 years ago. So that's a very, very long time. It will be very, very difficult, but it's not just anonymous tip-offs. I think the Mirror will be suggesting, in fact proving, that some of this came from people within Buckingham Palace, from friends of the Prince, from courtiers, from public relations people employed by members of the royal family. So there's a long way to go on this. I mean, Prince Harry may feel that it's a question of going into the witness box and telling his truth, his truth. Not at all. No. And it's a very rigorous process. It's a good process. It is a good process because it does get to the truth.
Yeah, we've had high-speed car chases that didn't seem to be high-speed or indeed a chase. We've had the old royal racism accusations. We've had all of these allegations in his book where this, I think, is where the house of cards for Harry could come tumbling down, because, as you've expertly said there, Michael, we can't have his truth. We have to have the truth. And this will be like nothing he's faced before. Michael, you're going to be joining me on and off throughout the course of this show. Thank you very, very much. It's royal commentator Michael Cole there. Loads more still to come between now and 4 o'clock. I'm going to discuss that bombshell report that says that the COVID lockdown was a terrible decision, and find out what Holly Willoughby had to say for herself in her first TV appearance since Schofield lost his job at ITV. And the award for the Best Actress goes to... But now it's headlines with Rory.
Cheers, Patrick. The Prime Minister says his plan on tackling small boats and asylum backlog is starting to work, but admits there is still a long way to go. During a speech in Kent, the Prime Minister said small boat crossings were down by 20%. Rishi Sunak also announced a further 2 barges to accommodate another 1,000 people, but would not comment on where they'd be located. The PM says the government is using every tool at their disposal to tackle illegal migration.
We've now returned 1,800 to Albania in just 6 months. We've gone from accepting around 1 in 5 Albanian asylum cases to now just 1 in 50, in line with our European partners. And what is the result of all of this? Well, so far this year, the number of Albanian small boat arrivals has fallen by almost 90%.
An inquest into the deaths of 2 young people at Bournemouth Beach found they died of drowning. 17-year-old Joe Abbas and 12-year-old Suna Khan were rescued from the sea last Wednesday, but both later died in hospital. Suna's mum says no parent should ever have to go through what she and her family are experiencing. The judge hearing the case of Prince Harry against Mirror Group newspaper says he is surprised the Duke did not attend the High Court today. The Duke of Sussex was expected, but will instead enter the witness box tomorrow. He will give evidence over claims that newspaper articles contained information that was gathered using unlawful methods. Prince Harry's barrister told the court there was no time in Harry's life when he was safe from this alleged activity. Mirror Group Newspapers is contesting the claims. You can get more on all of these stories by visiting our website. That is gbnews.com.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
All right, let's take a wee look at today's markets. The pound will buy $1.2422 and €1.1587. The price of gold, that's sitting at £1,577.90 per ounce. And the FTSE 100, that is at 7,594 points.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
People were banging on about this at the time. Lockdown will cause more harm than good, and a devastating new report exposes the terrible cost of COVID lockdowns. The study by the Institute of Economic Affairs found that shutting down the country in spring 2020 saved just 1,700 lives. I say just, of course, that's important. But then you roll the clock forward, don't you? Play the tape forward and you see the impact about how many lives are being impacted now. It says that's a drop in the bucket compared to the staggering collateral costs imposed. Researchers examined around 20,000 studies on measures taken to protect people against COVID across the world, and it found that strict lockdown restrictions saved fewer lives when compared to countries which had less strict restrictions. It is damning. The study found that prior to lockdown restrictions, the UK government were told to expect 500,000 COVID deaths in England and Wales. Well, the modelling came from Imperial College London, which said that tight restrictions could save as many as 400,000 lives. But the researchers found that just 1,700 lives were saved in England and Wales when compared to mortality rates in countries like Sweden, which relied on a system of voluntary restrictions. The report authors concluded that lockdowns were a global policy failure of gigantic proportions. One more time, a global policy failure of gigantic proportions. Hospitality was hit very hard by lockdown, and I'm joined now by Michael Kill, who's the CEO of the Nighttime Industries Association. Michael, thank you very much. Do you feel vindicated over lockdown?
Well, to hear that this could have been avoided, especially given the impact on the sector, is hugely concerning, devastating for many who've lost their businesses, their livelihood, and been plummeted into financial difficulties. So for us to hear this, it's hugely worrying as a report. And, you know, for the hospitality sector and the nighttime economy as a whole, given the fact that we lost about 150 to 200 billion pounds during the pandemic, it's hugely concerning, and I'm sure there are going to be calls for the government to answer the question on this.
Yeah, money lost, jobs lost, mental health impacted, record NHS waiting times, a huge financial outlay for the taxpayer, which we're going to be paying off as long as I'm alive, I think, and possibly my grandchildren as well, and very little accountability. One thing that I will also say, and this is vitally important as far as I'm concerned, is the cancellation and the mass outrage and hysteria and demonisation of anyone who at the time dared to suggest that lockdowns were doing more harm than good. You were told that you wanted to kill people. You were told that you were heartless. You were told that you should be cancelled and everybody should hate you. But the reality is, the people who were saying that lockdowns are doing more harm than good were right, and those people who wanted us all trapped to Chris Whitty's basement were wrong.
Hearing it now and hearing the reports, as you can appreciate, as a sector, we were under some legislative controls which were very difficult for us. So, you know, to hear it now and to hear some of the evidence, particularly from the body that represents this report, it's really going to call into question the government's position on this. So we are going to be calling for answers without a doubt.
What do you want to see happen, really? And can you explain to me the ongoing cost? 1,700 lives saved is a great thing, OK? I would obviously, it goes without saying, rather that 1,700 more people hadn't died. I am also, though, acutely aware of the situation at the moment where I am convinced that more people are dying as a result of the NHS backlog, etc., etc. I am also convinced, by the way, and I know this from first-hand experience, that a lot of elderly people would have rather have run their chances than have been locked away in their flat or their bungalow or wherever without being able to see any loved ones or in a care home for the best part of a year. So there's a lot of that. But can you explain the ongoing impact to your sector and your industry from lockdown, please?
Well, we've seen, as you can appreciate, the pandemic allowed us to open. We had a short honeymoon period, but without a doubt, it's come back with force. We've seen the legacy of some of the challenges around debt, around ongoing sort of cost inflation sort of position. I think probably the biggest impact that we've seen is the physical, social and mental well-being impacts that are still resonating right the way across the country. And while we talk about business loss, we talk about 10,000 businesses lost over the last 3 years, 150 to 200 billion pounds, 3% contraction in managed, 13% contraction in independent businesses. We've actually completely tipped the balance or the dynamic in things like high streets and city centres now. And we're starting to see the likes of clubs being lost 1 every 2 days, 8 pubs lost every couple of days. And all we're seeing is an 80% increase in energy bills, 40% increase in overall operating costs, and about a 15 to 20% downturn in trade because inflation is going to impact the consumer. And we've got no route out. We're between the devil and the deep blue sea in many ways.
Yeah, no, look, absolutely. And this is the major problem, I think, going forward for people, isn't it? Which is the ongoing effect of lockdowns, the hangover, as it were, of the lockdown situation. And I suspect now the cover-up, because this is it. It was very easy for people to tub thump at the time and go, you want to kill old people if you don't want to get on board with lockdowns. Well, now we're however many years on and the reports start to come out, reports of a Wuhan lab leak start to come out and all of this, and the cover-up starts, doesn't it? People go, oh, well, it's too long after the event now. Everyone's moved on. Nobody cares. Well, that's very convenient for the people who got it wrong at the time, isn't it? And I think people should be held to account for the damage that they have done to industries like yours.
Without a doubt. And there will be many people calling for that. I mean, interestingly enough, the COVID inquiry, which in all honesty has been called to be expedited, seems to be taking a very, very long time, and it's been very difficult to facilitate and engage with, and seems almost like a very closed door in terms of the input, particularly from the hospitality sector, that has been probably the biggest impacted. So for us, the challenge we have is we need an expedited COVID inquiry. We need to understand exactly what's going on, and we need to explore some of the issues that have been highlighted. Because as far as we're concerned, if this happens again, we can't be going down the same track. Can't be going down the same track.
Isn't it? That's the big message. Never again. Never again. Michael Kill, thank you very, very much, the Nighttime Industries Association. Now, some breaking news for you. This has just dropped in front of me right now. Beckenham MP Bob Stewart has been charged with 2 public order offences. The offences are alleged to have happened in December last year, according to the Met Police. I'll read that one more time. That Beckenham MP Bob Stewart has been charged with 2 public order offences. The offences are alleged to have happened in December last year. That's according to the Met Police. More detail on that as I get it for you, OK? So, just quickly now delving into the inbox, because it's been a bumper day in the inbox. GBviews@gbnews.com. Remember, it's that new email address now, OK? Lots of people getting in touch about the Rishi Sunak claiming that there's been a big win when it comes to stopping the boats. Patrick, we are absolutely not stopping the boats. There are thousands of people coming across, and this is not a good reaction from the Prime Minister. Does he not realise his job depends on it? And that is from Graham. Small boats, would it not be a good idea to, instead of keep paying for hotels and barges, we've got 2 new barges apparently arriving shortly. That was announced today. Apparently new barges in places that don't want them is what winning looks like when it comes to stopping the boats. Why not make all civil servants who work in the office and not from home? That's from Jan. And Jan, I believe that is in relation to the fact that apparently our work-from-home office, as I'm now calling them, are processing each caseworker something along the lines of 5 asylum applications every single month, which is shocking, isn't it? Absolutely shocking. I mean, there can be no excuse for that at all. And from what I can gather as well, this is why people can come on and go, oh, well, you know, most of those people have turned out to be genuine asylum seekers. Well, all right, yeah, fine, but that's like 1% of the entire claims, isn't it? And I do have a very strong suspicion that quite a few people are being waved through. But moving back on now. Holly Willoughby is back on your screens, but now one of her bosses is under fire for a disrespectful comment. Yes, that's right. I'll be telling you all about this very shortly. I'm Patrick Christys on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christys, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, The People's Channel. Britain's watching.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, The People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Yeah, great stuff. So I've just had it confirmed to me that just after 4 p.m, so in about 10 minutes' time, I will have Conservative MP Jonathan Gullis right here on this show talking about the government's attempts to tackle the migrant crisis. Sunak saying, we're stopping the boats, it's great. A lot of other people saying, no, you're not, it's the wind, mate. But anyway, Holly Willoughby rang bells of Meghan Markle in her opening statement on This Morning earlier today, asking viewers directly, how are you? OK. In an emotional first appearance since Philip Schofield left ITV, Holly, who was holding her co-presenter Josie Gibson's hand, said she felt shaken, troubled and let down. Well, you and me both, Holly. Delivered with the same insincerity as Schofield's interviews last week, Holly said it felt strange sitting there without him.
Me and all of us at This Morning gave our love and support to someone who was not telling the truth, who acted in a way that they themselves felt that they had to resign from ITV and step down from a career that they loved. That is a lot to process.
Well, it's a heck of a lot to process, Holly, yes. Meanwhile, this morning's editor, Martin Frizzell, has been blasted for disrespectful comments over the show's alleged toxicity. John Nicholson, who's the former member of the Culture Committee that is due to grill ITV on the scandal this week, criticised Frizzell for likening a toxic work environment to his dislike of aubergines, calling it a personal thing. All right. Let's speak to showbiz journalist Rebecca Twomey. Rebecca, thank you very, very much. It's great to have you on the show. What do you make of Holly Willoughby's statement this morning? She got quite emotional. I just wonder whether or not people find it a little bit disingenuous, given that she sat next to Philip for so long and that she was near that very sofa where he did his big coming out and all of this, and that now is regarded by many people as a bit of a smokescreen for the reality.
Yeah, I think, Patrick, we're probably going to disagree a bit today, so I'm apologising in advance for this. It did seem a bit contrived. It did seem very awkward this morning, Holly, and the sort of, the emotion behind it and the tears and the confidence. But I really have to step in really and say, well, what else was she supposed to do? Is she supposed to step down? I don't think she should personally. I know there are calls for that. But how was she really supposed to address viewers? And while you and I, might not need to be asked if we're okay, some people really do connect with this morning and did see Holly and Phil as godlike, like mummy and daddy that were on their sort of TV screens every morning telling them about the news. And I think she's really addressing those people and trying to make sure that they still care about the viewers, which obviously they do because it's a business and they need to have advertisers. And I think I feel the need to defend Holly. I don't think she's behaved perfectly, but I don't really think she's deserving of being attacked and attention. Even, last week when Alison Hammond presented this morning and she broke down as well. I think, tears are sometimes a part of stress. These people have been under a lot of stress over the last week, and they're right at the centre. They're right in front of the cameras, having to perform and having to sort of deal with this massive mess, which really they haven't created themselves, and they're at no fault for. So I have to say, I have to be a little bit more sympathetic today, and I know you're not going to like what I say.
No, it's not that I don't like it. It's your opinion, and that's absolutely valid. And for what it's worth, I'm getting a lot of emails from people saying, people should lay off Holly. Phyllis Schofield kind of weaved a tangled web, and we don't know what she knew and when she knew. And that's absolutely fair enough. And we may never. And also, as well, I did think with Philip Schofield, there is a big debate to be had about when enough is enough, OK? Because whether or not it's true, he did a very good impression of a man on the brink, didn't he? And unless somebody else comes out and seriously contradicts his version of events, one would say maybe, what else? What else is there that you could really do to kind of ruin this man, I suppose? The question for me is how believable it is that Holly didn't know anything. But from a purely showbiz perspective, Rebecca, and just to steer it away from that, I thought it was a fascinating insight into the world of television and show business, which is that when you are dead to someone, you are dead to them, and you move on quick. That bloke, he's out, he lied to us, here's a massive bus. Oh, sorry, Phil, right, there we go. Let's plough on with my career. And that's kind of what we saw, wasn't it, I think?
Yeah, it's really nice that you mentioned the showbiz element of this, because really, in the grand scheme of things, it is just a TV show. At this moment in time, we're not really aware of any criminal activity going on. So really, it seems like a really big fanfare over one TV show in the UK. And anyone who may have watched Apple TV's The Morning Show with Jennifer Aniston, that was just played out so well, the pantomime of celebrity and what happened and who knew what and who didn't do what. It's just going back to this whole thing about showbiz, in that we want our celebrities to be perfect. It's the new religion. They have to be perfect. And it's just interesting that we don't ever question this person isn't a good guy. And the thing is, what we have to ask ourselves is, does it matter whether or not they're a good guy? If Philip Schofield was believable as a great guy, someone we could trust in and someone that connects with the audience, does it really matter what goes on behind closed doors? And that's a question I think of our people in the public eye.
But this is a question, absolutely, that is going to have to be answered at the committee stage, really, by the bosses of ITV. And at the end of the day, there are people who are paid big bucks to make big corporate decisions. And if, and this is a big if they made a decision to keep a man who brings in the advertising, that's gone, hasn't it? But who brought in the advertising and was a lovable face, and they prioritised the show over, let's just say, the mental health of people involved on the show, or the mental health of junior staff, or indeed the individual involved with that, then that is a corporate question. I do think when it comes to Holly, were people realistically expecting her to come out of her own volition and say, hang on a minute, this is all going on behind the scenes? I think there is more sympathy for Holly Willoughby than there is for Philip Schofield, and I can understand that. Look, Rebecca, thank you very much. I really appreciate you coming on. It's great to have you on the show. Rebecca Twomey, their showbiz journalist. What do you make, though? This is absolutely dividing people, OK? Is enough when it comes to Philip Schofield? Some people think, right, that's it now. Other people think, well, no, what he did was terrible. Holly Willoughby, again, do you really believe her? Do you not? Is that something that maybe people should lay off Holly now? What do you make of all of that? It is going to rumble on, though. But moving on, when I come back, Rishi Sunak claims the government's plan to stop the boats is working. But is it really? In the next hour, in the next few moments, I'm speaking live to Jonathan Gullis, Conservative MP. I'm Patrick Christys on GB News, Britain's news channel.
joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News. The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, it's 4 p.m, it's Patrick Christys, it's GB News. And is this really what winning looks like? Rishi Sunak has announced there are going to be 2 more migrant barges. We've got people camped outside asylum seeker hotels saying this accommodation isn't good enough for me. No one's been deported anywhere or to Rwanda, pretty much as far as we can tell. Yet Sunak comes out today and hails his Stop the Boats policy as a success. You can tell how I feel about it, but I want to hear from you. In other news, Harry didn't bother turning up to court today. Yes, that's right, Prince Harry was a no-show for the first day of the phone hacking trial. He's angered his own legal team and he's angered the judge. Not a great start, is it, for Harry? In other news, yes, lockdowns, more harm than good, apparently. Now, I know a lot of people say hindsight is 20/20. I understand that, but do a lot of people now feel vindicated? And do you actually think maybe you were saying this stuff at the time? What has the knock-on effect been? Crucially, though, lessons learned and never again. I think that's where I am on that. And finally, to round us off this hour as well, women are fighting back in a big way, and you'd love to see it. They are saying no to trans men in their spaces, and the population at large, fewer than a third of people want to see biological men in women's changing rooms. So there you go. In fact, I'd quite like to have a strong check of those people who do think that's a good idea. Patrick Christys on GB News. A lot to go out there. GBviews at gbnews.com. Get those emails coming in thick and fast. Do you think that the Stop the Boats policy is working? Nigel Farage and our Home and Security Editor Mark White and people at the scene in Dover have been saying the same thing. Rishi, it's not the policy, the wind's blowing in the wrong direction. GBviews at gbnews.com. But now it's your headlines with Polly.
Patrick, thank you. Good afternoon. Well, breaking news in the last half hour here at GB News. The Met Police says Beckenham MP Bob Stewart has been charged with 2 public order offences alleged to have happened in December last year. Scotland Yard saying the 73-year-old has been charged with a racially aggravated offence after an incident outside the Foreign Office's Lancaster House on December the 14th. The Met Police saying he'll appear at Westminster Magistrates Court on July the 5th. More detail on that if we get it. Now, as you've been hearing, the Prime Minister says his plan on tackling small boats and asylum backlog is starting to work, but admits there is still a long way to go. During a speech in Kent, the Prime Minister said small boat crossings were down 20%. Rishi Sunak also announced a further 2 barges to accommodate another 1,000 people, but would not comment on where they were located. The Prime Minister says the government is using every tool it can to tackle illegal migration.
We've now returned 1,800 to Albania in just 6 months. We've gone from accepting around 1 in 5 Albanian asylum cases to now just 1 in 50, in line with our European partners. And what is the result of all of this? Well, so far this year, the number of Albanian small boat arrivals has fallen by almost 90%.
Well, the Labour leader Keir Starmer welcomed the news, but says the government still needs to secure more returns agreements with other countries.
I think everybody wants to make sure that we stop the boats. We don't want people making that dangerous journey. All we've really had from the government, though, is the announcement of a policy that doesn't work, then the re-announcement of the same policy, essentially. And it often feels, I think, like Groundhog Day. And meanwhile, that's costing a fortune for the taxpayer. And there's this growing sense of frustration. I mean, I'm at Hinkley Point C here today. Fantastic project. It's behind schedule, and there's a frustration here.
Now, thousands of British Airways and Boots employees are among those who've had their personal data breached following a cyber attack. BA says their staff were amongst those hit by the attack on Zelis, a payroll provider used by hundreds of companies across Britain. Pharmacy group Boots also said the attack had included some of its employees' personal details. It includes names, addresses and banking details. The judge hearing the case of Prince Harry against Mirror Group newspapers says he was surprised the Duke didn't attend the High Court today. It was previously thought Prince Harry would attend to give evidence over claims that newspaper articles contained information that were gathered using unlawful methods, but it's now been confirmed he'll enter the witness box tomorrow to give that evidence. Mirror Group newspapers is contesting the claims. An inquest into the deaths of 2 young people at Bournemouth Beach found they died of drowning. 17-year-old Joe Abbas and 12-year-old Suna Khan were rescued from the sea during the incident last Wednesday, but both died later in hospital. Dorset police say the beach was extremely busy at the time and they continue to appeal for witnesses to come forward. Now, as you've been hearing, Holly Willoughby has returned to the daytime TV programme this morning for the first time since the departure of her co-presenter, Philip Schofield. Opening the show alongside Josie Gibson, the new presenter on the show, she said she felt shaken, troubled and let down by Philip Schofield after he admitted to an affair with a young male colleague. She also said that she wants to get back to the warmth and magic that the show brings.
You, me and all of us at This Morning gave our love and support to someone who was not telling the truth, who acted in a way that they themselves felt that they had to resign from ITV and step down from a career that they loved. That is a lot to process. And it's equally hard to see the toll that it's taken on their own mental health. I think what unites us all now is a desire to heal for the health and well-being of everyone.
Holly Willoughby. Now, Ofcom says it won't be taking action after a Joa Ando said Buckingham Palace's balcony at the coronation was terribly white during the coverage. The watchdog says the comment made by the actress was a personal observation, which was part of a wide-ranging panel discussion. Ofcom also said it takes into account guests' right to freedom of expression. An anti-vaccine conspiracy theorist has been sentenced to 12 months in prison for plotting to destroy 5G masts. 59-year-old Christine Grayson discussed getting rid of the mobile phone masts after becoming obsessed with the belief that they were linked to the COVID-19 vaccine. Meanwhile, her co-defendant Darren Reynolds was jailed for 12 years after being found guilty of 8 terrorist offences. You're up to date on GB News. More news as it happens. Back now to Patrick.
Very shortly, I'll be getting stuck right into the big topic of the day, which is Rishi Sunak saying that his small boats policy is actually working. I'm not sure it does look like it's working. We're hoping to hear from Suella Braverman, the Home Secretary, live in the House of Commons as well. But Jonathan Gullis MP will join me in just a matter of minutes. But I wanted to give my little diatribe, anyway, on another top topic today, and it's Prince Harry not turning up to court. Is Harry really so thick that he thinks that it's a good idea to anger the judge in his phone hacking trial? Well, apparently so. He was supposed to be in court today, ready to give evidence if needed, but he pulled out at the last minute because he wanted to attend his daughter's birthday party. I mean, he only had a year to plan for it. She's only 2 as well, so she wouldn't really have known it if it was a day earlier. What a muppet. How on earth can Harry expect to be taken seriously if he's late for his own court date, letting his legal team and the judge down? People have to take time off work, miss family weddings and funerals, important life events to attend jury service. But Harry is so arrogant and entitled that he thinks he can actually call a court case and then not show up because it doesn't work around his life. You can picture the scene, can't you, at Woke Mansion in California? Meghan pipes up at the last minute as Harry's out the door. Harry, where are you going? Well, I've got my court case. Oh, is that today? But it's Lilibet's birthday. Oprah will be here. You can't let her down. I mean, this trial, good grief, is make or break for Harry. He will face brutal cross-examination, and in a court of law versus a top barrister, his truth won't matter. The truth will. He could be on the hook for a huge sum of money in legal fees if he loses, unless, of course, he's signed a no-win, no-fee agreement. It could also benefit Mirror Group massively, who could use this case as just cause to stop making payouts for people who feel as though they had their phones hacked in a bid to stop them going to court. And reportedly, the judge has the power to say that Harry has brought these accusations too late and could potentially dismiss some of them, which would save everyone a lot of time, frankly. Mirror Group may argue that they received information from anonymous tip-offs, or just genuine tip-offs, really, and not from phone hacking, which, again, could see Harry out on his backside. But for me, this last-minute no-show, supposedly due to his daughter's birthday, strongly implies that there are issues going on at home, and it might not just be the judge kicking him out on the curb soon. Email me, gbviews@gbnews.com. I will have lots more on that story a little later this hour, but let's get stuck straight into our top topic. And the Prime Minister has announced that his Stop the Boats policy is working. Oh, great. We can all go home. Fantastic. This is great. He says that channel crossings are down 20%, but admits there's still a long way to go. Rishi Sunak revealed that more barges would be on the way to house an additional 1,000 asylum seekers. So this apparently is what working looks like, people. However, he has yet to indicate where they'll be moored. One other barge has already been earmarked for Portland in Dorset, a place which has provoked widespread local opposition. Earlier on, I spoke to the head of communications at the Refugee Council, Mark Davies. Let's just have a little listen about what he had to say. Also, Rishi Sunak was defending the idea of detaining initially child migrants, people claiming to be children coming across the channel. Do you think that's inhumane? Because he was saying we're going to do this because we want to deter people from just pushing children out into the channel and knowing that we will be able to take them.
I mean, it's totally inhumane. It's not fundamentally in line with British values, actually, Patrick. I think it's just something that most people in this country would find absolutely abhorrent, and it's a really horrendous thing. I mean, the fact is, and these are facts, unfortunately, from the Home Office's own statistics, that the vast majority of people who come across on the boats are genuine refugees. They're from places like Afghanistan, which is a place that we said where we'd help people. And the facts are that when claims are processed, the vast majority of those claims are agreed, so 75% of all claims. And you're absolutely right that they should be processed much more quickly, absolutely, and we've got this absurd backlog. But that doesn't mean that people are twiddling their thumbs and not doing anything. In fact, when they are processing the claims, they're finding that people from these terrible countries, all these countries which are facing real problems, like Afghanistan, which, as I said, we promised that we'd step in and help people facing the Taliban and all the threats of that, and we've let those people down.
It's interesting excerpts I've chosen to play of my interview with him there, given that I went on to say to him, well, we're hardly processing anyone, are we? And indeed, the majority of people coming across the channel now appear to be from non-war-torn countries. But there we go. Suella Braverman is speaking in the House of Commons right now. I will bring you some of that very, very shortly. Let's cross over, though, to Dover and join our Home and Security editor, Mark White. Mark, Rishi says that the Stop the Boats plan is working. Well, a lot of people are saying, no, it isn't, Rishi. It's just the wind.
Well, the Prime Minister, it was just after 9 o'clock this morning, Patrick, when he slipped on his life jacket and headed out on that Border Force vessel out into the Channel. And he would have seen for himself the choppy conditions, the moderate breeze and what that can do to the waves out there. But still, the Prime Minister is claiming that 20% reduction in those crossing was at very least in part due to the government's tougher approach. Now, it seems strange that he didn't ask some of those Border Force personnel who man these vessels, because they, like every other maritime expert we speak to down here, will tell him that actually the reduction in the small boats coming across has got little to do with a tougher approach and everything to do with the winds, the direction the winds have been blowing in, the fact that they have been blowing at such a level that it's just above the acceptable limits in terms of what these small boats can cross under. So that's been putting them off. There have only been occasional days where the wind has relented and they've come across, of course, as always, in their hundreds. We filmed before a small boat, trying to make its way past the front of the port of Dover, being lashed by the waves as it did, Patrick, and that really gave, I think, a proper stark illustration of the conditions out there. Today it's only blowing between 16 and 18 miles an hour, so just dipping into the moderate wind scale, but that's enough to make it impassable for these small boats. And that's what we've had for the most part since October of last year. That's been fortunate for the government. It's allowed, of course, the Prime Minister to have some respite from the very significant numbers coming across. But, of course, there is a danger in claiming that the reduction in numbers is down to the government's policy, because when in the very flat, calm months of the summer, those numbers grow very significantly, then that will be pretty difficult, I would imagine, for the Prime Minister to defend.
Mark, thank you very much. Mark White there, our Home and Security editor from Dover. Now, Rishi Sunak's saying it's working, OK? We've had around 1,800 Albanians removed back to Albania. 12,000 came last year, many of whom are either still in hotels or have gone missing. So that returns programme, the only thing they've returned to is a life of crime on the streets of Britain, isn't it? We've got a massive backlog of asylum claims at the moment, which are going at the rate of something like 5 per month. Our work-from-home officers, I'm calling them, are managing to process 5 claims a month in individual case studies, which I find absolutely staggering, to be honest with you. That's not working. No deportation flights to Rwanda taking off, and we are unable, it would appear, to swerve the ECHR. Joining me now is the Conservative MP for Stoke-on-Trent North, Jonathan Gullis. Jonathan, thank you very, very much. Now, Rishi Sunak is hailing a victory for the Stop the Boats policy. Is he lying?
No, I think he's absolutely right to point out the fact that there has been great success, particularly with the Albania deal, Patrick, because what it has done is brought down Albanian arrivals by 90%. So that 1,800 illegal Albanian migrants and foreign national offenders being returned has seen a 90% reduction in the attempts to come over here.
Oh, we've lost Jonathan. We'll get Gullis back, though, don't we? We'll bring him back. OK, so what he's saying there, and I hope he doesn't mind me paraphrasing here, but what he was saying there was that we've seen something like a 90% reduction from people from Albania. Now, OK, that's fine. My argument to that would potentially be, is Jonathan back again? I think he is. Jonathan, good stuff. Sorry, mate. So basically, you were saying that we've seen a 90% reduction of people from Albania. Look, that's fine, but the problem is we let so many in to begin with.
Well, look, I totally agree with you, Patrick. We need to make sure that we put this returns agreement on steroids and get those planes going and seeing the thousands return as quickly as possible. I don't want to see any more Albanians lingering in our hotels than need to. And the ones that sadly have absconded once entering this country to enter the life of crime that they are, because we know that the Albanian drug gangs have replaced the Vietnamese cannabis gangs of the past. So, we need to make sure that we've got our police cracking down on our streets, rounding these people up and then getting them back to Albania as soon as possible. But you're correct to say that with other countries, it's all about Rwanda. We know that the Court of Appeal is obviously due to come back soon. Hopefully, and I believe it will find in favour of the government. And the moment that happens, we need to get planes off to Rwanda, because I think that the British public will hinge the success or failure of all our policies on small boats and stopping the boats on whether or not they see a plane take off to Rwanda at all.
Absolutely. Success, I think, looks like people in Calais packing up their tents and going the old reverse ferret back through France because they realise that we are no longer a soft touch. Jonathan, can I get your reaction to some criticism for Rishi Sunak from the usual types who were saying, you shouldn't be putting child asylum seekers in detention centres? He was saying, well, we're doing this because we want to deter people from pushing a boatload of kids outside into the Channel, if indeed, of course, they are children to begin with, Jonathan.
Well, first of all, Patrick, you're correct in saying that we don't know if these people actually are children. We're having to take it at face value. Out of those 200 alleged children that went missing, 95% were between 16 and 17 years old. How convenient to be just below the age of an adult in the United Kingdom. And of course, we know those people absconded. They weren't taken, as the CCTV evidence has proven, as we heard from the floor of the House from the Minister for Immigration. And the Prime Minister is also correct in saying that if we were not to put so-called children into these barges, then we'll just be convincing the smugglers to advertise two mothers with children and say, we're going to put a boatload of you, which is a boatload of human lives that could be at risk, that don't need to be at risk because they're already in safe mainland France. So the do-gooders, the lefty lawyers, the interview had with the person from the Refugee Council who wants to probably virtue signal his Islington dinner parties, yet hasn't offered his home or his spare bedrooms to legal migrants, yet we've got hotels full up here in Stoke-on-Trent, should perhaps actually go out of the London bubble, go knock on some doors around here where I've been in Norton Estate this very afternoon and actually hear some reality on the ground.
Jonathan, I was infuriated by people deciding that a central London hotel at the taxpayer's expense with Wi-Fi, food and perfectly serviceable accommodation, legal accommodation, was not good enough for them. These were people who'd travelled across 2 continents and had not been happy anywhere they'd been. They are not asylum seekers, they're asylum shoppers, in my view, and we are clearly identified as being a soft touch. What would you do with people who refuse perfectly usable accommodation in this country?
I would offer them the first airport with a flight back to where they originally came from and say that we'll happily lay on that accommodation. You are right. I mean, poor souls not being able to get decent Wi-Fi. And you are correct, Patrick. It is asylum shopping. And do you know who used that phrase first that I heard since I got elected? The MP for Bury South, Christian Wakeford, or Christian Wokeford, let's be perfectly frank. Mr. joining the Labour Party and virtue signalled. He used the term asylum shoppers. So when everyone attacks people like you and me, Patrick, for using these terms, let's not forget where it originally came from. And now sitting Labour member of Parliament. And I think it's so important to understand that, yes, you are right. People, and the majority of people, do claim asylum in the face of first safe country that they should do, as they are meant to. This 10-12% of the world that then looks to basically choose where they want to go. They are shopping around. They're in France, a NATO member, a UN founder, a nuclear power country. Are you seriously telling me that their life in France will be any worse than it would be in the United Kingdom? It's absolutely for the birds. And they need to just basically understand that you're not going to be allowed to spend thousands of pounds in the hands of smuggling gangs to come here illegally, to try and jump the queue and take advantage of our hospitality and our goodwill in this country, because it undermines what we're trying to do with the genuine asylum seekers, the women and children we've taken out of Afghanistan, out of Syria, out of Ukraine and out of Hong Kong to make sure they're protected. The British people are compassionate, but they believe in fairness.
Yeah, and Jonathan, I seriously think Rishi Sunak should have used today as an opportunity to stand up and hold up, bizarrely a report penned in part anyway by David Miliband, who, well, we all remember him, don't we, from that International Rescue Commission or whatever it's called, where he was basically saying the European Union are not doing their bit when it comes to asylum seekers. It's no wonder everyone wants to come here, because this is the land of milk and honey compared to a distant Greek island with bunk beds on it, and they say even if you are granted refugee status, you've got 30 days to leave, you'll have no no job, you'll have no money, you'll have nowhere to live, and you'll be out on the street of Athens. So it's no wonder people want to come here. Why is Rishi Sunak not hammering the point home that we are doing more than other people, and actually enough is enough?
Well, I think the Prime Minister's right to try and get more of our European partners to follow the Greece model, which I think is a very good model, very sound model, and we should be certainly going as far as they have been in our own country as well. But ultimately, I think the European Union needs to put on notice, and that means things like the European Convention of Human Rights, as I've said to you before, Patrick, needs to be put on the table and says if they keep meddling and interfering, then we will walk away from that. And if that needs to go into a manifesto in the next general election to make sure the House of Lords understand that they don't have some God-given right to just block anything that they want to, because they don't like it. The Archbishop of Canterbury virtue signalling again the House of Lords, yet not worried about the fact that year on year we're seeing the amount of people claiming to be Christian in this country drop, the fact there's historical sexual abuse claims that he's having to deal with. But no, he'd rather spend his time trying to virtue signal at every opportunity. I know Lambeth Palace is nice and spacious and big. I've got plenty of people in Stoke-on-Trent, with hotels being used. I'm sure he'll be happy to volunteer for his palaces to be used instead, so we can get our hospitality sector back on its feet.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely fascinating. I must say, Jonathan, we're going to have to part company now, but it's great to have you on. Jonathan Gullis there, MP for Stoke-on-Trent North. I actually attended a church service recently, and I don't mind saying this, where there was a collection that was being done for the local asylum seeker hotel, and I thought, OK, well, that's absolutely fine, don't get me wrong, but I couldn't help but notice that the church that I was in appears to have had a huge amount of money pumped into it, and that the church itself is a fabulously wealthy organisation. I just think, taking additional money on top of taxes, and when the church is sitting on a lot of wealth is interesting. But there we go. Home Secretary Suella Braverman has given an update on the government's attempts to clamp down on illegal migration. I believe we can have a little look and listen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With permission, I would like to make a statement about the progress of the government's plan to stop the boats. Mr. Speaker, this is a complex and enduring problem which we must tackle on multiple fronts. It is also a moral imperative. That is why the Prime Minister, unlike the Leader of the Opposition, made stopping the boats one of his 5 pledges to the British people. And while Labour has no plan, Mr. Speaker, we are getting on with our plan to stop the boats. While there is a long way to go, there are several outcomes to note. Firstly, Mr. Speaker, the Small Boats Operational Command was established in December to oversee operations in the Channel, with a new Senior Director, Duncan Capps, a former general, appointed to lead it. We have doubled the funding for Operation Envigour over the next 2 financial years, which brings together the National Crime Agency, Home Office Intelligence and Policing to help disrupt the people smuggling gangs upstream. Secondly, by freeing up immigration enforcement officers, illegal working raids increased by more than 50% between January and March this year compared to the same period in 2022. Since the introduction of the Nationality and Borders Act in June 2022, immigration enforcement have doubled the number of arrests, charges and convictions compared to the same period in the preceding year. We have established...
OK, that's Suella Braverman there, addressing the House of Commons after Rishi Sunak has come out saying that his Stop the Boats policy is indeed doing rather well. She's talking about their clampdown on illegal migration. OK, so Prince Harry was meant to be in court today, but guess what? He didn't bother turning up. I'm Patrick Christys on GB News. More on that when I come back. Britain's News Channel.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christys, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Every Sunday from 11. Join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
OK, so in a few minutes' time, I will discuss a devastating report that says that the COVID lockdown was a massive mistake. Lots of people saying, hey, hindsight is 2020. I understand that. We're not going to dwell on it too much, but I do think that for all of the massive cancel culture that was taking place at the time initially, for anyone who dared to say, look, are we making a mistake here? I think we owe it to those people to actually highlight some of these reports, which, frankly, you are not seeing a huge amount of on other news channels. And I wonder why? Well, I'll tell you, because they were complicit in it. But there is some breaking news. Apparently, this is massive and you all care about it. Princess Eugenie has given birth to her second child with husband Jack Brooksbank, a boy named Ernest George Ronnie Brooksbank. Ernest is 13th in line to the British throne and will be a plain Miss or Master. The royal couple became parents for the first time in February 2021 when they welcomed their now 2-year-old son, August, to the world. Prince Harry's landmark case, moving on, Prince Harry's landmark case against Mirror Group newspapers is underway, but it started without him. The judge expressed surprise at the Duke of Sussex's absence, whilst the Mirror's lawyer said it was deeply troubling. Harry was due in court as the first British royal since the 19th century to give evidence in a London courtroom, as he seeks damages from Mirror Group newspapers over alleged unlawful information gathering. Harry's lawyer has told the High Court that details of the Prince's life were a story too good not to publish. I'm joined by GB News' royal correspondent, Cameron Walker, who's at the High Court. So, Cameron, we can expect Harry tomorrow, can we?
Yes, that's the idea, Patrick, although we did expect him today and that didn't happen, so who knows. But no, he is definitely meant to be at the High Court tomorrow because he is being cross-examined by Mirror Group newspapers KC, who is going to essentially question Prince Harry's narrative or indeed version of events. And this is perhaps a bit of a risk for Prince Harry because he is used to questions from, let's say, friendly journalists such as perhaps Oprah Winfrey or those who carried out promotional interviews for his memoir Spare. And all the answers he gives are going to be cross-examined by this KC. And it will be interesting to see how Prince Harry copes under that pressure and whether he very much sticks to what he believes. And he believes that Mirror Group newspaper journalists unlawfully obtained information about him in order to write stories and therefore, by extension, sell newspapers. But the judge earlier today, when it became apparent that Prince Harry was not going to be here, he flew overnight to London following Princess Elizabeth's birthday, his daughter, yesterday on Sunday. The judge was surprised that he was not there because he had actually said at a previous hearing for this case that he wanted witnesses available the day before they were expected to give evidence in case the opening arguments took a lot less time than expected. And in fact, Andrew Green, who's the KC for Mirror Group newspapers, he said he was deeply troubled by the fact that Prince Harry was not here today, saying that there is potential for it to be wasted time this afternoon. But Prince Harry's lawyer, David Sherborne, he is essentially saying that Prince Harry is in a different category for the other witnesses because A, he's got to travel across the Atlantic, and B, the security arrangements that go with being a senior member of the royal family has to be taken into account. But as you said in your introduction, Patrick, David Sherborne was essentially saying that in the eyes of Mirror Group newspapers, a story about Prince Harry was too good not to publish, and stories drove sales, and those sales were the ends which justified what Prince Harry's lawyer was arguing were the unlawful means for Mirror Group newspapers to obtain unlawful information about Prince Harry. So he's going to be in court tomorrow, Prince Harry is, answering questions from the KC representing Mirror Group newspapers. Mirror Group newspapers contest all the allegations made against them, and we'll have to wait and see exactly how Prince Harry copes under pressure, under oath.
Absolutely. Cameron, thank you very much. Cameron Walker, our royal reporter. We'll be having Michael Cole again on very shortly, the royal commentator, to give his take on it. Just going to delve into the inbox now, gbviews and gbnews.com on this very one. And Michelle, I think, has hit the nail on the head. She says, absolutely right, Patrick. Harry is so arrogant. He thinks the court should work around him. If I were the judge, I'd rule, as the entitled ex-prince couldn't be bothered to turn up for his court case on time, that the case be thrown out. P.S. Love GB News. Well, we love you too, Michelle, so thank you very, very much for that. I just want to tease ahead a little bit as well and say that in the next hour, I'm going to be having a big debate, and I want your views. You can see that email address on your screens. If you're listening on radio, I'll tell you what it is. It's gbviews@gbnews.com. And I want to know whether or not you think that people who turn down asylum seeker accommodation in this country should just be deported. I have got a debate on that in the next hour. But in just a matter of moments, I'm going to be talking about the bombshell report that says that the COVID lockdown was a terrible decision. But look, it's not just about the economics of it all, OK? It's in terms of the amount of lives it saved. And can anyone hear a scandal coming when it comes to these WhatsApp lockdown file things? And the reason why maybe they don't want them getting out there, I suspect it might just have a little thing to do with the idea that they knew that there wouldn't have been a huge benefit to lockdown, but they pressed ahead with it anyway. And there is news of a poll that shows that the vast majority of women, shock horror, they don't want transgender athletes to compete in female sports. You know what else? They also don't want men, yes, that's right, men in women's changing rooms. Who knew? But now it's the headlines with Polly Middlehurst.
Well, some rather happy breaking news, as you've just been hearing from Patrick. Princess Eugenie has announced the birth of her second child. It's a baby boy. His name is Ernest George Ronnie Brooksbank. She posted a photograph on her Instagram account earlier on today, saying the baby was born on the 30th of May. Princess Eugenie says son August is already loving being a big brother. Congratulations to her. Now, the Prime Minister says his plan to tackle the arrival of illegal migrants to the UK on small boats, as well as reducing the asylum backlog, is starting to work. But he admits there is still a long way to go. During a speech in Kent, the Prime Minister said small boat crossings were down 20%. Rishi Sunak also announced a further 2 barges to accommodate another 1,000 people, but wouldn't comment on where they'd be located. And the Metropolitan Police says Conservative MP Bob Stewart has been charged with 2 public order offences alleged to have happened in December last year. Scotland Yard said the 73-year-old had been charged with a racially aggravated offence after an incident in central London last year. The force has said he'll appear at Westminster Magistrates Court on July the 5th. And an inquest into the deaths of 2 young people at Bournemouth Beach found they died of drowning. 17-year-old Joe Abbes and 12-year-old Suna Khan were rescued from the sea last Wednesday, but both later died in hospital. Suna's mum says no parent should ever have to go through what she and her family are experiencing. More on all of those stories by heading to our website, gbnews.com.
Loads of people out there think that banging on about lockdown and the consequences of it is yesterday's news and that hindsight is 2020. And I understand all of that, but I think it is important to learn the lessons from it and make sure that if something bad happens, it doesn't happen again. I also think it's worthwhile making sure that people who made knowingly erroneous decisions aren't allowed to get away with it and then continue to go on and make those decisions. I do also think as well, and I've got to be honest about this, it vindicates a lot of people. We've had reports very far down the line, brushed under the carpet by a lot of people in the media, the same media class that were heckling Boris Johnson, shouting, we need to lock down more, we need to lock down harder. And whenever anyone said, well, hang on a minute, what about all the consequences? They were absolutely battered again. I wonder very, very much whether Beth Rugby and Robert Peston will be going as big on this story as we are. But this is a devastating report that exposes the terrible cost of the COVID lockdowns. The study by the Institute of Economic Affairs found that shutting down the country in spring 2020 saved just 1,700 lives, which it says is a drop in the bucket compared to the staggering collateral costs imposed. The study found that prior to lockdown restrictions, the UK government were told to expect around 500,000 COVID deaths in England and Wales. The modelling came from Imperial College London, which said that tight restrictions could save as many as 400,000 lives. So we were literally double wrong, weren't we? But the researchers found that just 1,700 lives were saved in England and Wales. Hey, that is a great thing, don't get me wrong. But when compared to mortality rates in countries like Sweden, which relied on a system of voluntary restrictions, the report authors concluded that lockdowns were a global policy failure of gigantic proportions. Joining us now is Reem Ibrahim from the Institute of Economic Affairs. Reem, the economic aspect of this is absolutely massive. The lack of life-saving is also a big one, but the way that people were forced and bullied into compliance with a set of rules and regs based on erroneous modelling, I think is the real story here.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I think that fundamentally what this report shows is it effectively casts a shadow of a doubt over a lot of these lockdown measures. I mean, we're looking at these figures that have come out of the report today that was published by the Institute of Economic Affairs. Effectively, it showed that the mortality rates that we saw coming out of the United Kingdom compared to Sweden were only about 3.2% lower. Now, that 3.2% is just a drop in the bucket when compared to the huge catastrophic consequences of lockdown. We're not just talking about inflation, we're talking about businesses failing, we're talking about mental health problems, the NHS effectively becoming a COVID service rather than a national health service. So a lot of the impact on these, a lot of these consequences have actually shown that the COVID lockdowns were effectively a catastrophic failure.
And do you suspect that one of the main reasons why these WhatsApps are being so closely guarded, allegedly, by Rishi Sunak and co, is because they might have actually been alerted to these situations at the time? I do think that they could come out swinging there and say that there was so much media pressure from the usual types every single day at these things. You get Robert Peston standing there going, oh, shouldn't you be doing this instead? Shouldn't you be locking down harder and faster? Meanwhile, he lives in an absolutely massive gaff and lockdowns don't really matter to him. And actually, he's going to work every day anyway. I just wonder whether or not the government felt so pressured by the media that they thought, oh, we better just lock down, knowing that it wasn't really the best course of action.
Yeah, I mean, the government were pressured by the media, but they were also pressured by the public. I mean, the polls relatively showed that actually a lot of this scaremongering meant that a lot of the British public were actually quite supportive of the lockdowns. Obviously, we didn't have all of the evidence then, but this report that was published today by the IEA actually shows that in retrospect, a lot of those hard, fast lockdowns were not required at all. And actually, the mortality rates that were saved by that time were only 3.2%. What the report also does show, though, is that a lot lot of those voluntary changes in behaviour were really what actually mitigated the consequences of the pandemic. So things like voluntarily social distancing, washing your hands, things that people do, generally speaking, with common sense already. So they didn't need the government to do that for them. In Sweden, for example, they had much less draconian measures and effectively saw very, very close results in terms of mortality rates. But of course, they didn't see all of those catastrophic consequences from the pandemic, like the economic consequences. We saw huge amounts of businesses closing down in the United Kingdom as a result of the government's lockdown. We also saw, the mental health impact and, of course, that impact on our public services. So I think that, generally speaking, the psychological impact of COVID was not required, and that's what's damning about this report.
OK, Reem, thank you very much. Reem Ibrahim, there of the Institute of Economic Affairs. You've helped compile this report. I just want to delve into the inbox here because I want to tease ahead to a big debate that I'm going to be having in the next hour, and it is one that's got a lot of you going. Today's been a big day for the migrant crisis in the Channel. Rishi Sunak standing on a plinth saying his Stop the Boats policy is working. Immediately, people are pushing back on that, saying, actually, what has seen a reduction in channel crossings by around 20% has got more to do with wind direction than his policies. Rishi Sunak is hailing the fact that they've deported around 1,800 people back to Albania. A lot of people very quick to point out that we allowed 12,000 of them in last year, and many of those people have absconded. It's also worthwhile noting, isn't it, that, as I think many people would agree, until a flight to Rwanda takes off, or other countries, or maybe boats are turned back, which, let's be honest, is not going to happen, or taxpayers are being charged less money every single day for asylum seeker accommodation, then actually we're not going to be able to say that the Stop the Boats policy is indeed working. But I was shocked a bit last week to discover that asylum seekers in central London were camping outside a hotel because they didn't like the conditions of it. And when we drag in all of those stories together, I'm going to be having a big debate in the next hour on whether or not people who refuse asylum seeker accommodation in this country, be it barges, be it hotels, be it social housing, should be given a couple of options. We will fly you back home to whatever country you say you're from, we will take you back to France, or you can voluntarily go to Rwanda. And I want to know what you think about all of that. Moaning and protesting over hotels should put them straight on the coach and put them on the Eurostar to a new hotel in France, says Joe. There's a lot about this coming in, as well. A lot of love as well for Jonathan Gullis, who was on earlier, the Conservative MP, who's been very, very strong about all of this. Good afternoon. The Prime Minister mentioned about the Albanian numbers reducing, but he never mentioned anything about those being replaced by people from India, and their numbers are going up. That's from Simon. Yes, exactly. All of these myths about the Stopping the Boats cycle being a success are about to be busted right here on this very show at the top of the next hour, and also as well when I have that big debate. And I want to know from you, gbviews@gbnews.com. Do you think that people who refuse asylum seeker accommodation in this country with Wi-Fi, with free food, many of whom have already been living at the taxpayer's expense, being paid a weekly allowance, whether or not they should just be deported straight away? gbviews@gbnews.com. But the overwhelming majority of Brits, get this, think that trans women shouldn't be allowed in female-only spaces. What's fascinating is that on Twitter at the moment, the phrase #TERF Island is actually trending because apparently we have more quotes-unquote TERFs than any other part of the world. Well, I'm sorry, but if being a TERF means not wanting someone with full male tackle getting changed next to you in a women's changing room, then I think that's more normal than TERF, but I think it's just plain common sense. Patrick Christys on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
The Jubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate. Both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat.
Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. News channel.
All right, so at 5 o'clock, I will bring you the very latest on the government's attempts to tackle the migrant crisis. Well, some new indications that it actually isn't working particularly well. But a new survey has found less than 1 in 3 Brits support trans women being allowed in female loos and changing rooms. The Sex Matters polls also shows less than a quarter of us think transgender athletes should be able to compete in women's sports. It turns out the public aren't 100% behind the so-called inclusion of males in female sports. Who knew? Sex Matters says its findings should encourage the government to clarify the Equality Act ahead of a parliamentary debate on protecting single-sex spaces. I am joined now by Helen Joyce, who's the Director of Advocacy at Sex Matters and is the author of Trans: When Ideology Meets Reality. I suspect that it's just been dished out a rather healthy dose of reality. When people are asked what they really think, shock horror, they don't want someone with male tackle getting changed next to them.
Absolutely. I think a lot of the polls that show anything different than that, or a lot of the people who say they think different things from that, like Ed Balls talking to Kathleen Stock last week,
ironically,
are relying on linguistic confusion. People don't actually know what a trans woman means. Some people think it means a woman who identifies as a man, or some people think that at least you have had to have a hormone treatment, surgery, and a doctor's diagnosis. Actually, trans woman is the activist phrase for a man who calls himself a woman. And once you put it that plainly, it seems pretty obvious to me, and it turns out the majority of British people, that those people do not belong in women's spaces.
Yeah, so why aren't more politicians turning out? I mean, they stand for election. This is what I cannot understand. Politicians have a mass popularity contest once every few years where they are voted in by people, and here is all of the data that shows that most people do not want blokes turning up at women's sporting competitions or in the changing rooms at the swimming baths, OK? And yet we are bending over backwards to adhere to some people who just added a few more colours to a flag.
I mean, the activists can be so painful in the way they act towards you that it's kind of easier not to rile them up. And I think a lot of politicians, rightly enough, think there's a lot else going on and they'll do better talking about the economy or, house prices or something like that. It just seems too toxic to touch. And that's been a very, very deliberate tactic for some years now of the trans rights activists. I don't know how many people will choose their vote on the basis of this. If I could just clarify something about the poll, what we're actually asking is, should people be allowed to insist that men who identify as women are not allowed in? We're even asking a more basic question. We're not saying that you can't have a service that allows them in. What we're saying is, can you have a service that keeps them out? Because at the moment, the Equality Act is not clear on that. It's not clear whether men who identify as women.
But that's what needs to change, and that is the important clarification that you need. And businesses will need that because they don't want to get hauled before a court. And I can understand that, by the way. The companies and corporations don't want to end up, wheeled before some kind of judge where they go, well, we banned someone from doing something and this is transphobic or is against someone's human rights. So the government needs to lead the way on this and allow companies and corporations to ban people from being able to enter certain spaces, in your view.
Well, what they need to be able to do is to run services that are for one sex only, and to make that clear in the signage, expect everybody to follow the rules and tell people politely but clearly when they're breaking the rules that they must leave. And it's really the job of legislators to make sure that this is simple. At the moment, all the risk is pushed down onto service providers and onto individual service users who have to try to take court cases or go to the press. I mean, we have lots of case studies of people who, last week we heard about a woman who turned up at a hostel late at night, was put in the women's dormitory, and there was a bloke in there. Yeah. And this is not safe, not fair, So the legislators need to act, and it is actually their job. The clue is in the name, legislators.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I can't help but notice as well that it's Pride Month. It's not Pride Day, it's not Pride Week, it's Pride Month. It'll be Pride Decade next, although it more or less is. I saw and it warmed my heart, actually, to see that a very prominent hospital in London had just spent a huge amount of money. Instead of maybe getting rid of the NHS waiting backlog, had actually plastered a huge trans and rainbow flag right across this new walkway that has been built from an artist. I mean, I don't quite understand the logic there, but they're very proud, that's for sure. One of our regular contributors here at GB News was saying that at his son's school, they are celebrating Pride Month. They've taken the school's flag down. They've put the Pride flag up. There. That flag will remain there apparently for 6 months, as it did last year. All of the children are turning up to school in a variety of different, flag-encrusted clobber. Is there indoctrination of children going on here?
Oh, completely. There's loads of teaching materials that say that male and female are things you identify as. And if you tell children that young enough, they'll believe it. I mean, there is a bit of a difference in the polls that we found. Younger people are more likely to say really horrible things like, if an elderly woman needs intimate care and says she wants it from a female carer, should the care provider be able to restrict that job really to female people only, or should the care provider have to allow male people who identify as women to apply? And younger people are more likely to say yes. Can you imagine forcing that on your granny? So I think those young people know what they're meant to say to seem kind and haven't actually thought through what is kind, because it is not kind to overstep women's boundaries in this way.
Absolutely. Helen, thank you very much. Great to have you on the show, as ever. Helen Joyce there is the Director of Advocacy of Sex Matters and the author of Trans, When Ideology Meets Reality. I certainly hope the reality kicks right in sometime soon. But there is now less than 4 weeks to go until my date with destiny. Yes, on Wednesday, June the 28th, I will be dancing on stage with the Dream Boys, who say they are the most famous group of male strippers in the UK. As many of you know, I'm doing 3 routines on the night. One of them will be a solo. I met with the lads a few weeks ago to learn those dance moves, and I will be showing them off, if you can call it that, in Bromley, in Kent. And I have been practicing very, very hard for all of this. Viewers now will be able to see some of the Dream Boys strutting their stuff on a stage. I will be doing, believe it or not, things like this. Not for my own personal enjoyment, not because I enjoy humiliation, which, let's be honest, it will be. It's because I want to raise money for the mental health charity Mind. And you can donate now at justgiving.com/fundraising/Challenge Christys. I really want us to hit 60 £50,000 if we can. We have £54,000 in the bank at the moment, thanks to your generosity and your love and your goodwill. I promise you I am taking this seriously, OK, as much as I can. It is going to be humiliating for me, but that is the least I can do if people like your good selves are willing to dip your hands into your pocket. Go to justgiving.com/fundraising/challenge Christys and give anything from £2 to £2,000, as some people have. For my part in it, I have done a lot for this. I've gone down from 15 stone 8 to 12 stone 7. I really am trying my best to fit in, which is not going to happen, by the way, as much as possible with the Dream Boys. We will be filming it, and it will be going out on GB News. I will be doing it on the 28th. If we can hit 60 grand, that would be great. JustGiving.com/fundraising/challenge Christys. Thank you very, very much. Let's save some lives with the mental health charity Mind. So, when I come back there, Rishi Sunak says the government's winning the battle to stop the boats. I'm not sure he is. Really, Rishi? I'm Patrick Christys on GB News, Britain's news channel.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christys, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Every Sunday from 11. Join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Deebs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Good evening, it's 5 p.m, it's Patrick Christys, it's GB News, and we're going in with this. Rishi Sunak says his plan to stop the boats is working. Well, you could have fooled me, and you could have fooled the taxpayer who keep forking out, paying through the nose for these relentless asylum seeker hotels. On that note, I've got a big debate coming your way, OK? Should asylum seekers who refuse perfectly serviceable accommodation be given a choice? They can go back to where they came from, they can get on a plane to Rwanda, or they can video people on the other side of the channel and tell them not to bother coming because it's clearly awful here. Big debate on that very, very shortly. In other news as well, universal basic income. Now, this is interesting, OK? And trust me, we're ahead of the curve on this one because this is going to be an issue affecting you going forward. We keep hearing, don't we, about AI going to take people's jobs. Is the solution to provide people with a basic living wage just funded by the government, or is that going to be wealthy people just paying for lazy idiots to do absolutely naff all day? Talking of lazy idiots, here's me, yes, Patrick Christys. So this is me back in the day. There we go, yes, 15 stone, 8 pounds, which is a bit of a shocker. I am dancing on stage with the Dream Boys to raise money for the mental health charity Mind, and that, yet again, was me back in the day on your screens there. So far, you wonderful people have raised close to £55,000. I want to get to 60 grand. It's taking place in less than a month's time. I've got a lot more training to do. I can guarantee you, seriously, I really am. I'm training every day, I'm working every day. I'm trying to learn the routine as best as possible while I humiliate myself on stage. That Just Giving link is justgiving.com/fundraising/challenge Christys. If we can get to 60k for the mental health charity Mind, it would mean the world to me, and it will save lives. Patrick Christys on GB News. Get those emails coming in, gbviews@gbnews.com. I'm going to ask you this hour, if people refuse asylum seeker accommodation in this country, should they just be deported? gbviews@gbnews.com. Headlines now, though, with Polly.
Patrick, thank you. Good evening. The top story on GB News tonight. The Prime Minister says his plan to tackle the arrival of illegal migrants to the UK in small boats and the asylum backlog is starting to work. But he admits there's still a long way to go. During a speech in Kent, the Prime Minister said small boat crossings were down 20%. Rishi Sunak also announced a further 2 barges to accommodate a further 1,000 people, but wouldn't comment on where they'll be located. The Prime Minister says the government's using every tool at its disposal to tackle illegal migration.
We've now returned 1,800 to Albania in just 6 months. We've gone from accepting around 1 in 5 Albanian asylum cases to now just 1 in 50. In line with our European partners. And what is the result of all of this? Well, so far this year, the number of Albanian small boat arrivals has fallen by almost 90%.
Well, the Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, has welcomed the news, but says the government still needs to secure more return agreements with other countries.
I think everybody wants to make sure that we stop the boats. We don't want people making that dangerous journey. All we've really had from the government, though, is the announcement of a policy that doesn't work, then the re-announcement of the same policy, essentially. And it often feels, I think, like Groundhog Day. And meanwhile, that's costing a fortune for the taxpayer. And there's this growing sense of frustration. I mean, I'm at Hinkley Point C here today. Fantastic project. It's behind schedule, and there's a frustration here.
The Metropolitan Police says Conservative MP Bob Stewart has been charged with 2 public order offences alleged to have happened in December last year. Scotland Yard says the 73-year-old has been charged with racially aggravated offences after an incident in central London. The force has said he'll appear at Westminster Magistrates Court in July. Thousands of British Airways and Boots employees are among those who've had their personal data breached following a cyber attack. BA says their staff were amongst those hit by the attack on Zealous. That's a payroll provider used by hundreds of companies across Britain. And the pharmacy group Boots also said the attack had included some of their employees. It includes the names, addresses and personal banking details of their staff. The judge hearing Prince Harry's case against Mirror Group newspapers says he was surprised the Duke didn't attend High Court today. It was previously thought Prince Harry would attend to give evidence over claims that newspaper articles contained information that were gathered using unlawful methods. But it's now been confirmed he'll enter the witness box tomorrow to give that evidence. Mirror Group newspapers is contesting the claims. An inquest into the deaths of 2 young people at Bournemouth Beach found they died of drowning. 17-year-old Joe Abbes and 12-year-old Suna Khan were rescued from the sea last Wednesday, but both later died in hospital. Suna's mum says no parent should ever have to go through what she and her family are experiencing. Holly Willoughby has returned to the daytime TV show this morning for the first time, following co-presenter Philip Schofield's exit. Opening the show alongside new This Morning presenter Josie Gibson, Miss Willoughby said she felt shaken, troubled and let down by Schofield after he admitted to an affair with a much younger male work colleague.
You, me and all of us at This Morning gave our love and support to someone who was not telling the truth, who acted in a way that they themselves felt that they had to resign from ITV and step down from a career that they loved. That is a lot to process. And it's equally hard to see the toll that it's taken on their own mental health. I think what unites us all now is a desire to heal for the health and well-being of everyone.
Now, Ofcom won't be taking action after a Joa Ando said the Buckingham Palace balcony was terribly white during ITV's coverage of the coronation. The watchdog says the comment was made by the actress in a personal observation capacity, which was part of a wide-ranging panel discussion. Ofcom also says it takes into account guests' right to freedom of expression. Princess Eugenie has announced the birth of her second child. It's a baby boy named Ernest George Ronnie Brooksbank. She posted a photograph on her Instagram account earlier on today, saying he was born on May the 30th. Princess Eugenie says her son August is loving being a big brother already. And a little bit of breaking news to bring you from the United States. We're learning the details that the former US Vice President Mike Pence will be running for the 2024 Republican presidential nomination. Pence, of course, running, therefore, against the former US President and frontrunner Donald Trump. He's expected to formally launch his campaign with a video and a speech on Wednesday. Full details of that right here on GB News. This is GB News. More news as it happens. Back now to Patrick.
Well, a little later this hour, I'm going to be having a big debate about whether or not asylum seekers who refuse accommodation in this country should just be deported or given the opportunity to go and start a new great life in Rwanda. So I'm going to be talking about all of that, and I want your views coming in. gbviews@gbnews.com. A lot of strong ones in there. I'll be going to those shortly. But the reason why I'm asking that is because it is part of a package, isn't it, the asylum seeker hotel policy? It's part of Rishi's Stop the Boats policy. And today, Rishi Sunak claims that his Stop the Boats policy is working. But it isn't. He's massaging more figures than a woman in the back streets of Soho, having to secure 2 new barges at the taxpayer's expense, which, he announced today, isn't actually what winning looks like. Having asylum seekers put up in central London hotels, camping out on the streets because they don't like the conditions, isn't what winning looks like. He's claiming the Albanian return scheme has been a success. At least 12,000 came last year. 1,800 have now been sent back. Many more have absconded. So the only thing they've returned to, really, is a life of crime on the streets of Britain. He says that boat crossings are down 20%. The French are stopping 40% more than they did last year. Well, OK, but that's cost us hundreds of millions of pounds. And the wind blowing in the wrong direction appears to be the main reason fewer people are actually coming over. Saying Albanian boat crossings has fallen by 90% would be more of a triumph if we hadn't already let in so many of them to begin with. Rishi will not stop the boats until flights to Rwanda take off or until people who refuse to stay in free, perfectly fine asylum seeker hotels are deported back to where they came from. Make no mistake, these people have travelled across 2 continents. They're not happy with the conditions anywhere they go. I will say it again. They're not asylum seekers, they are asylum shoppers. Rishi will also not stop the boats until we get the processing sorted. All he's doing so far is adding to the backlog. More people lounging around in Britain on the taxpayers' expense, waiting for some wokey from the work from home office to get round to looking at their case file sometime next year. This is what the public need to see with their own eyes to actually believe that the Stop the Boats policies are working, OK? This is what we need to see. Swerving the ECHR, getting those Rwanda flights taking off. Less taxpayers' money being spent on asylum seeker hotels. Rapid processing, and ultimately, and this will be the real test, people in Calais packing up their tents and voluntarily heading back through Europe because they now realise that Britain is no longer a soft touch. That is what stopping the boats really looks like. And that isn't what we've got, is it? gbviews at gbnews.com is indeed that email address. As I said a moment ago, the Prime Minister claims that his Stop the Boats policy is working, but he admits that there's still a long way to go. Rishi Sunak also revealed that more barges would be on the way to house additional 1,000 asylum seekers. However, he is yet to indicate where they will be moored. I have this beautiful image of someone in a lovely seaside community one day. Oh, quick stretch, get out of bed, draw the curtains, wallop, there's a big migrant barge outside your front door. One of the barge has already been earmarked for Portland in Dorset, which went down like a cup of cold sick with the locals. Here's what Rishi had to say.
Today, I'd like to update you on the progress that the Home Secretary and I are making. And my message is this: our plan is starting to work. Before I launched my plan in December, the number entering the UK illegally in small boats had more than quadrupled in 2 years. Now, some said this problem was insoluble, or just a fact of 21st century life. They'd lost faith in politicians to put in the hard yards to do something about it. And of course, we still have a long way to go. But in the 5 months since I launched the plan, crossings are now down 20% compared to last year. But we are not complacent because we know people smugglers are highly organised and will change their tactics if we let them. I will not rest until the boats are stopped. With grip and determination, the government can fix this. And we are...
So that was what Rishi had to say. I can now speak with Jeremy Hutton, who is from Migration Watch UK. A little later on, Jeremy, I'm going to be having a debate as to whether or not people who refuse perfectly good asylum seeker accommodation should just be deported. But let's stick to the Stop the Boats policy at the moment. 2 new barges are going to be rocking up at a town near you. That's not what winning looks like, is it?
No, it won't feel like victory to the people of whatever towns these end up in. And similarly to the people who will have migrant camps being opened in airfields and those sort of locations near their homes, near their schools, near their places of work, it won't seem like victory, although ultimately we do need to get people out of hotels and into cheaper accommodation. If it's just a short-term measure to, turn things around and actually sort this out all at once and for all, then it will be worth it. But if this is, going to be years of people being put in barges on other people's doorsteps, then that just won't do.
No. So Rishi's stood up, bold as brass today, and gone, look, it's working. And then immediately anyone around the Dover area said, you do understand that the wind is blowing in the wrong direction. How likely is it that Rishi Sunak is going to have egg on his face in a couple of months' time and we're going to see more record numbers?
It's interesting when you take it from that perspective, because the weather in May has indeed, around the channel, been really quite windy. And if you look at the wind speed, you can understand why people aren't crossing. Overall, it does seem like there is a real reduction, but I think that's more likely down to the Albanian agreement, which has taken away quite a large portion of the customer base for crossings. Once we get into the summer proper, of course, there's going to be a lot more people from far wider. And when he was saying, of course, that 30% more people have been entering Europe, well, they're still on the way to North France, maybe. And give August, give it September, they could be getting into boats and crossing into the UK en masse.
Yeah, no, indeed. And we have people like the Archbishop of Canterbury who stand up bold as brass as well and go, well, look, we've got to have something like 80 million displaced people by 2050. Yeah, well, they're all going to try and come here, a lot of them, aren't they? And so maybe we need to do something about that. But, you know, Jeremy, when it comes to people on the other side of the channel, I think stopping the boats, the success will be when people over there realise that they are better staying in France than they are here. And as it currently stands, we are nowhere near that being the case, are we?
No, not at all. I think the Pimlico hotel protest that you'll have heard about last week, where migrants were camping on pavements and protest, was actually, ironically, quite a positive sign, because it showed that they weren't satisfied with what they were now getting, which is what...
Oh, we've lost Jeremy there. That's a shame. But, yeah, Jeremy is alluding to something that we're going to be having a debate on in just a matter of moments, because it was this hotel situation where people are camping outside. It's a novel solution, isn't it? But why not use those people to do a bit of PR on our behalf? If they are so bitterly disappointed with the accommodation, which, by the way, was completely humane and passed all the tests and was absolutely fine in the end, their main issue was bunk beds, having 2 bunk beds in a room. The kind of conditions that military veterans, many of whom will have served in Iraq and Afghanistan, OK, would absolutely give their hind teeth to be able to sleep in at the moment. And there are people who claim to be from Iraq and Afghanistan who are occupying those for the taxpayer at the taxpayer's expense. Whether or not those people should just be deported, but why not use them for a bit of PR? We can be going to places like Calais. It would be cheaper than everything else that we're doing, wouldn't it? Giving the French a load of money to do, well, a little bit more when it comes to stopping the boats. Why not have video footage of those people outside saying, you know what, I really don't like it here in Britain. It's taking me ages to get processed. I don't like the conditions that I'm being kept in. Why not show that to people in France or coming across from other different routes and say, well, look, this is the reality of what it's going to be like for you. It is not the complete land of milk and honey that it could be. But your views have been absolutely fascinating on this, and I'm going to look at some of those now. I am asking whether or not you think that we should be doing more to actually get rid of people who, frankly, turn down perfectly good asylum seeker accommodation. You could offer them the chance, could you not, to go on a one-way ticket to Rwanda to start a new life. These supposedly desperate, persecuted, vulnerable people should be grateful for a tent in a field in Britain. After all, it's better than being in fear of your life. But the majority of them are just opportunists effectively robbing the taxpayer. And our homeless ex-servicemen don't even get the tents. That's from Samantha. I've got one here from Brian. He says, Patrick, illegal migrants shouldn't be offered any accommodation. They should be deported right away because they are here illegally. Refusing the accommodation is not acceptable. They should be sent back, says Oriana. So that ties in perfectly with the debate and the discussion that we're going to be having very, very shortly. I do want more of your views on that as well. But look, as I've said, it's all very well and good Rishi Sunak standing up today and saying, oh, we're stopping the boats, this is great. But he's picked a good time of year to do it. And I suspect he knows that as well, because the wind has been blowing in the wrong direction. So the reality will possibly be, anyway, this summer, that we're going to see a higher influx. And is he going to have egg on his face? The Albanian thing as well, again, be wary of this, because they are being quite squishy with the figures. We allowed 12,000 Albanians and the rest in last year. 1,800 have gone back, and a lot more have absconded. Bear in mind, though, that it's like we kind of plugged one hole and another one has opened up, because people from India are now occupying a lot of the boats coming in. Well, what's he going to do with that? Will we have a better returns deal with India? So keep your eyes and ears peeled, because, yes, very shortly I'll be having a debate on what we should do with people who turn down asylum seeker accommodation. More on this on our website, though. Simply head to gbnews.com, where you will find the best analysis, opinion, as well as the latest breaking news. But just quickly, there's less than 4 weeks to go until my date with Destiny. On Wednesday, the 28th of June, I will dance on stage with the Dream Boys. They're the most famous group of male strippers in the UK. I am doing it to raise money for the mental health charity Mind. And I am delighted to say that in the last few minutes, we, thanks to you, have gone past £55,000. Thank you. We've raised nearly £1,000 in about 15 minutes. So I really, really, really appreciate it. You can go to justgiving.com/fundraising/challenge Christys, justgiving.com/fundraising/challenge Christys. Marion's chucked in a tenner. Thank you. Julie's chucked in a £5. Great stuff. Shella and David, maybe I should say Sheila, it's £10. Ken and Denise, 20 quid each. Look, thank you very, very much. This is absolutely wonderful. I really do appreciate it. For my part in it, I'm going to be doing 3 dance routines. OK, look, obviously this is utterly humiliating, right? But that's kind of the point. This is my end of the bargain. I do not really want to be on stage with a bunch of male strippers. I do not really want to be dancing on stage. I have no rhythm, and I have a body like a blancmange. So I am trying to do my bit. I've lost 3 stone for this. I've given up booze. I've given up all sorts. So if you've got a couple of quid, it might be quite nice. The main reason behind this, just to reiterate, is for the mental health charity Mind, which is justgiving.com/fundraising/challenge Christys. I was very shocked to learn that every single day 12 men take their own lives and that suicide is the biggest killer of men under the age of 40, which is a proper epidemic, isn't it? And Mind do a lot of work stepping in when the NHS backlog is too big for people with acute mental health issues, and they save a lot of lives. And the money that you've raised so far, which is above 55 grand now, will go a long way to helping people stay alive. And that's people with wives and children, husbands and whatever, people who really need to be alive, you know? And so if we can do a bit for them, that would be great. Justgiving.com/fundraising/challenge Christys. Every little helps. Yes, I will also be doing some kind of weigh-in update very shortly, which I'm not looking forward to, but there we go. Moving on. Prince Harry was meant to be in court today, but guess what? He didn't bother turning up. I'm Patrick Christys on GB News, and I'll be talking about all of that when I come back. It's Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
So Dubes & Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat.
Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
All right, in a few moments, we're going to be having a debate on this. Should we deport migrants who refuse to stay in their free accommodation? But before all of that, Princess Eugenie has given birth to her second child with husband Jack Brooksbank, a boy named Ernest George Ronnie, who is 13th in line to the throne. The royal couple became parents for the first time in February 2021 when they welcomed their now 2-year-old son, August, to the world. Goodie. Their announcement comes as Prince Harry's landmark case against Mirror Group newspapers is underway, but he's not bothered to show his face in the High Court yet. The judge expressed surprise at the Duke of Sussex's absence, whilst the Mirror's lawyers said it was deeply troubling. We can get the latest on both of those quickly now with our royal correspondent, Cameron Walker. Cameron, thank you very much. A bit of good news and then a no-show.
Patrick, yes, a very bit of good news. Princess Eugenie, of course, the late Queen's granddaughter, and she said, post on Instagram in the last hour or so, she said, Jack and I wanted to share the news that we had our little boy, Ernest George Ronnie Brooksbank, on the 30th of May at 8:49, weighing 7 pounds and 1 ounce. He is named after his great-great-great-grandfather, George, his grandpa, George, and my grandpa, Ronald. Augie is loving being a big brother already. August, of course, is their first child, and this new baby that has just been born in the last week is 13th in line to the British throne. So a bit of good news for the royal family amongst all the turmoil, of course, which is happening in the High Court behind me.
Yes, exactly. Look, Cameron, thank you very, very much for this. It's Cameron Walker there, a royal correspondent with the latest, some good news. Royal commentator Michael Cole joins me now for the drama. That's right. OK, so, Michael, Harry didn't turn up today. He is due in court tomorrow. I want to throw ahead to what we're expecting tomorrow, OK, because I think that he's going to get picked apart, potentially, by, well, a lawyer, by a real barrister who is going to expose the difference between his truths and the truth.
If Prince Harry is wise, Patrick, he will begin his sojourn in the witness box by offering the judge a profound and sincere apology for a no-show today. It is extremely bad manners of anybody not to turn up at the time you're supposed to be there, and to begin a case with a wigging from the judge is not a good beginning. Punctuality is the courtesy of kings, it's the courtesy of princes, and that is not a good beginning for him. He's going to have a fairly torrid time because he may believe that going into the witness box and being sworn to tell the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth is a question of presenting his truth to the court. But it doesn't work like that. Any journalist, and I know you've seen many major cases, knows that everything turns around on cross-examination. And the Mirror Group are going to vigorously defend these cases. There are 33 of them. Initially, Prince Harry had cited 144 instances of alleged intrusion, illegal intrusion, illicit intrusion of his privacy and that of his friends, including his former girlfriend, Chelsea Davy. That has been whittled down by the judge to 33. Now, each one of these cases will be picked over, and that must involve the King's Counsel taking him back on episodes that maybe he does not want to revisit, like wearing a Nazi uniform, like falling out of nightclubs in the middle of the night, like playing strip pool in Las Vegas.
Right, because you're exactly right. This is a fascinating point, because presumably these are the headlines that Harry wasn't happy about being put out there. And he is, as far as we are aware, claiming that the only way they could have got hold of these nasty, embarrassing headlines is through some form of phone hacking. So actually what he is doing now, voluntarily, is allowing us all to revisit and talk about again all of the worst moments of his life.
That's precisely it. He has been on the record as saying that what he wants to do is reform the British press. Well, he's going to do that the hard way, because it's going to involve him exposing himself to all these stories again, and that will not be pleasant for anybody. I mean, I speak from some experience. I was the key witness in 2 high-profile High Court cases, and for 2 days I was in the witness box during the inquest into the deaths of Diana, Princess of Wales, and Dodi Al-Fayed. However well prepared you are, however well you believe in what you're going to say, and you know it to be factually truthful, The problem for you is that you've got a barrister who is there determined to present the other side of the case. And that will be done with forensic skill. I'm quite sure the King's Counsel representing the Mirror will be absolutely, scrupulously polite, but there'll be some very, very hard questions. And as you say, it's going to revisit areas which he perhaps wished had been dead and buried. I've written pieces saying this is a very, very risky, high-risk thing, and had Her Majesty the Queen been advised, she would have said, don't do it. The thing with a case like this, you don't know where it's going to go. There is no guarantee. He does not have any control over this. Witness the fact that everybody alive today, nobody has ever seen this again. There's nothing in the British Constitution which says a prince cannot go into the witness box. But it hasn't been done since the Victorian age, when Queen Victoria was utterly dismayed when her eldest child, her eldest son, who became Edward VII, went into the witness box in two very notorious cases, one involving cheating at cards and the other one involving adultery. And she was mortified by that. She thought it was a dreadful thing to do, and that's why it's never, ever been done. And it's a highly risky process, and it's not going to be easy.
No, it's not going to be easy. Do you buy this idea that he didn't turn up today because he had Lilibet's second birthday party to go to?
Well, I would hate to be the barrister who has to put that forward as an excuse, because it's not an excuse.
No.
It's been well known when the case started some time ago, just after the coronation. He has to be here. I mean, whether a 2-year-old child knows whether her father's there or not...
Well, you have a birthday party the day before.
Well, indeed. It doesn't wash. I mean, he is the lead witness in this. There are 4 other people involved, lesser personalities, but his testimony is absolutely crucial. And the judge starting today didn't know how long the statements were being from the opposing counsel. He could have got on to witnesses today, and then you'd have had a case where he'd had to rise early because that valuable and highly expensive time was wasted because the key witness wasn't there. This is not the right way of going about things. These are His Majesty's courts of justice. Don't forget that. They're his father's courts of justice.
He's got no... This is part of it. I mean, it does play into an image, really, of somebody who's, you know, very entitled, quite arrogant, really, and has no respect or regard for, you know, due process. And we await with bated breath. Michael, you're going to be a busy man over the next few days, as indeed you always are here at GB News. Great to have you on. Michael Cole, their royal commentator, who's going to be picking you through tomorrow as well. Prince Harry's actual... back and forth in legal interaction. I think it will be a fascinating watch, that, people, because that will be, I think, where truth meets reality. But loads more to come between now and 6 o'clock. Should migrants who refuse to stay in nice hotels be deported? We are going to debate that, and we will discuss the plan to give £1,600 a month for people who do nothing. Yep, your ears are not deceiving you. But first, it's your latest headlines with Polly.
The headlines this hour: the Prime Minister says his plan to tackle the arrival of illegal migrants to the UK in small boats and tackle the asylum backlog is starting to work, but he admits there's still a long way to go. During a speech in Kent, the Prime Minister said small boat crossings were down 20%. Rishi Sunak also announced a further 2 barges to accommodate a further 1,000 people, but wouldn't comment on where they would be located. The Metropolitan Police says Conservative MP Bob Stewart has been charged with 2 public order offences alleged to have happened in December last year. Scotland Yard says the 73-year-old had been charged with a racially aggravated offence after an incident in central London. The force has said he'll appear at Westminster Magistrates Court in July. An inquest into the deaths of 2 young people at Bournemouth Beach found they died of drowning. 17-year-old Joe Abbes and 12-year-old Suna Khan were rescued from the sea last Wednesday, but both later died in hospital. Suna's mum says no parent should ever have to go through what she and her family are going through. And the former US Vice President Mike Pence will be running for the 2024 Republican presidential nomination. Pence will run up against the former US President and frontrunner Donald Trump. He's expected to formally launch his campaign with a video and a speech on Wednesday. And as you've been hearing, Princess Eugenie has announced the birth of her second child. It's a baby boy. Little Ernest George Ronnie Brooksbank has been born. She posted a photograph on her Instagram account earlier saying he was born on the 30th of May. Princess Eugenie says her son August is loving being a big brother already. More on all those stories by heading to our website, gbnews.com.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Looking at today's numbers for you, the pound will buy you $1.2441 and €1.1607. The price of gold is £1,576 and 5 pence an ounce, and the FTSE 100 closed today at 7,599 points.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News, investments that matter.
Well, last week, a group of asylum seekers camped out on the street outside a hotel in central London. They slept rough for 2 nights and were refusing to stay in their free, taxpayer-funded accommodation because it wasn't nice enough. They were happy with the food, though, which is good, isn't it? And they also said that they have Wi-Fi, which is actually more than I've got at home at the moment. So do these asylum seekers have the right to complain, or should they be grateful for what they've given? Should we go as far as deporting people if they refuse the accommodation that they are given? Joining me now is human rights lawyer Shoaib Khan and also Niall Gardner, who's the director of the Margaret Thatcher Centre for Freedom. Niall, thank you very much. I'll start with you. Do you think that we should be deporting people if they refuse perfectly good accommodation?
Well, thanks, Patrick, for having me on the show today. I think it's absolutely outrageous that you have asylum seekers who are complaining about their accommodation. If this kind of accommodation is good enough for British citizens, or is good enough for the military, why on earth are asylum seekers complaining? They should be incredibly grateful for the accommodation they have been offered in the United Kingdom. I think it sends an appalling message when you have asylum seekers protesting about their accommodation here, when many British citizens, of course, live in conditions that are far more cramped and difficult. So I do think there's a fundamental lack of gratitude here. And the reality is, of course, that many of those who are claiming asylum in the United Kingdom shouldn't be in the country in the first place as well. We need to see far tighter border controls in place, and illegal migrants should be definitely deported. And I think that there has to be very careful scrutiny of all of these asylum claims. And clearly, I think many of those claiming asylum should not be in the country in the first place, and those individuals should be deported.
OK. Shoaib, I'll just put it to you that those people who are lounging on the street outside a perfectly serviceable asylum seeker hotel are not actually asylum seekers. They've travelled across 2 continents. They're not particularly happy anywhere they go. If they're not happy here, then we should offer them the chance to return home.
Well, no, of course not. I mean, obviously, we're conflating lots of different issues there. Whether or not they're genuine asylum seekers, whatever that means, is something for the Home Office to decide. I mean, obviously, the Home Office has never been, certainly at the moment isn't, great at doing its job. But obviously, at some point, it falls upon them to actually decide whether or not these people should be allowed to stay in the UK. But now what we're talking about is, while these people are in the UK, should we allow them to be in comfortable hotels, provide them proper, humane accommodation? For instance, it's not just them or, the usual lefty loonies complaining about this, but for instance, I think it was the head of Westminster Council who said firstly they weren't actually consulted when these people were accommodated in hotels there, but the head of the council in fact admitted that it's insufficient, inadequate accommodation. So I think we need to take those concerns seriously. What doesn't look good and what doesn't reflect well on the government is these people on the footpath having to sit on the street because their hotel rooms are not good enough for them to be staying in.
Can I just put to you, Shoaib, something, just literally a cursory look online. It's called the Comfort Inn, and it's got a rating of 4.5 stars out of 5 from the many thousands of people who have stayed in there. And, I mean, I would suggest strongly that this is absolutely fine, and that may I point out as well, very recently elected Labour head of Westminster Council, is probably blowing a bit of hot air here. Niall, do you think that we should, at the very least, be using these people as PR so that they can video call people waiting in Calais to make the Channel crossing and tell them, don't bother, because it's clearly awful here?
Well, I think, it's absolutely outrageous. You have large numbers of young men here complaining about their accommodation, physically fit young men. They've actually crossed the Channel from France, claiming asylum. Why didn't they just stay in France? And why are they in the United Kingdom at all? I mean, this just makes a mockery of the entire asylum system here. And the British government should not be paying £6 million a day to house illegal migrants in the UK. I mean, it's absolutely outrageous. It's an affront to the British taxpayers, an insult, I think, to the British people here. If they don't like their accommodation, well, then go somewhere else. Then go back to France, where they actually came from. And there's no reason why on earth they should be crossing into the UK from France, part of the European Union. They should be returning there if they're not happy, or they should be going back to their countries of origin here. I do think that the government has to end this practice of paying vast sums of taxpayers' money to fund illegal migrants in the UK. It is just basically this insult, I think, to the British taxpayer, the British people, should not be tolerated.
Look, Shoaib, if the people here feel as though it's against their human rights to stay for free in a hotel in central London with food that is clean and that has Wi-Fi, then would we not be doing them a favour for their human rights to send them on a plane to Rwanda?
No, we wouldn't, because Rwanda is no better. Rwanda is worse. Would we be saying the same thing about Ukrainian asylum seekers? I mean, why are we accommodating
but the Ukrainian asylum seekers aren't kicking off, are they? Because they're fleeing war. Now, that's the really interesting point. Actually, see, that's a really fascinating point, isn't it, actually? Because a lot of the Ukrainian asylum seekers and refugees appear to be very happy because they are fleeing war. And the vast majority of them, Shoaib, are women and children, aren't they? Unlike the fully grown fighting
because we sent flights to bring them over. Because we brought them over on planes. And everyone's always moaning about and complaining, pointing out the fact that most of the channel crossers and small boats, people crossing small boats, are men. So what, do we actually prefer it to be women and children? Do we want women and children risking their lives?
It would feel...
So, I mean, I just really understand the logic there. Of course it's men.
I'll tell you the logic. I'll explain it to you. I'll explain it to you. People would find it a lot more easy to accept and tolerate women and children coming over because they naturally would appear to be more vulnerable than some of the young men who wander over on a daily basis. It appears more believable that women and children would be in more need of urgent asylum than someone who looks like a 30-year-old bodybuilder.
It might be more believable, but I think it's definitely the right decision these families make. OK, let the men go over. They settle their lives here, then the children, families
but that's
can come
migration,
here safely. When there's a safe way to do so. Why did we send planes to Ukraine for women and children when we don't send them anywhere else? How are these people supposed to come here? Like the other person was just saying, so many of these, they cross so many countries, continents to get to the UK. Do we want women and children doing that? How can women and children do that? And I think that's just really an appalling thing to suggest. You can't be genuine asylum seeker if you didn't bring your 2-year-old toddler with you.
If I could just respond here, but there's a huge difference between women and children fleeing from Ukraine, from a war zone, and they are extremely grateful, I think, to be in the United Kingdom. Huge difference between these women and children and these healthy young men, so-called asylum seekers, who are now complaining about their accommodation at the Premier Inn in London. There's a vast difference here. And I think that it's this should be clearly acknowledged by all sides here. And these protests by asylum seekers who've come from France, after all, this is just absolutely unacceptable. It shows tremendous a lack of gratitude to the British people.
Both of you, thank you very, very much. I thoroughly enjoyed that discussion. This human rights lawyer, Shoaib Khan, and also Niall Gardner is the director of the Margaret Thatcher Centre for Freedom. Now, people in the northeast of England and London are going to be given £1,600 a month for nothing. Absolutely naff all, OK? Is that unfair? Or is it, in fact, a very good idea? If you're confused by this, so was I, but I'll be explaining it to you in just a couple of seconds. Patrick Christys on GB News, Britain's news channel.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christys, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Every Sunday from 11. Join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Here's a question for you. Would you like a load of cash for doing nothing? Well, that's what some lucky people in Jarrow and East Finchley... I used to live in East Finchley. Anyway, in East Finchley will be getting. It's part of a trial which will see 30 participants receive £1,600 a month with no strings attached. With me now is Ryan Shorthouse, who's the Chief Executive of the Liberal Conservative think tank Bright Blue. Look, thank you. Explain this to us, because there is more to this than meets the eye. It's about a universal basic income trial, which is not essentially just money for nothing. Is it a study in how people will spend this money and whether or not it's the right thing for the government to do? Talk me through it.
Well, there's lots of countries that have been trialling this universal basic income. Scotland has had a trial recently. Wales is undergoing a trial. Finland did one about 4 or 5 years ago. And the government, after seeing that trial, concluded that they wouldn't proceed with introducing it. But basically, it's the idea that everybody gets an unconditional flat rate amount. So you don't have bureaucracy in the welfare system. So people don't have to engage with job centres or certain rules for getting benefits from the government. And lots of people have advocated this, including a lot of people who were worried about the impact of automation on jobs. And so this feeling that if everybody had this basic high minimum, they wouldn't have to go through all the sort of complexity and stress involved with getting an adequate amount of money to live on.
With respect, also, sorry, I mean, would they also have to bother to get a job? I mean, this is part of it, isn't it?
Well, the idea is that everybody, it's universal, so everyone would be entitled to it. So it would reduce the stigma associated with claiming benefits. I mean, I personally am against it. I don't think it's a good use of taxpayers' money. I mean, basically, if you're going to give everybody an adequate amount of money to live on, considering a lot of people have, for example, lots of children or they may have disability, the rate would have to be so high. So, for example, if everyone received the 1,600 that the people are in this trial at the moment, we'd be talking about trillions of pounds of taxpayers' money to pay for this sort of thing. So I don't think that's a good use of money. I mean, the alternative is that it's such a low rate to become more affordable that it doesn't really cover the living expenses of people with more complex needs.
Is it not? Is the reality of the situation?
At the end of the day.
Yeah, is the reality of the situation that people are so terrified that we have quite literally created our own downfall with AI, that loads of jobs are going to be taken, and that the whole future of capitalism rests upon this? Because if people are out of work because of AI, then they can't buy things like iPhones, which means that companies go bust. So if you just chuck them 1,600 quid a month, they can still do stuff with their money, and society as we know it functions.
Well, that's a sort of very conspiratorial sort of view of why people are advocating it. But I mean, I think there is a genuine case for, you know, for supporting people and having less complexity and bureaucracy and stigma. But as I say, I just think at the end of the day, it wouldn't be good use of taxpayers' money. I think what is more effective is making sure that people who have higher needs get the support that they need. And also we support people into work. The thing about universal basic income is that it may not really be an incentive for people in very vulnerable circumstances to work. And I believe that work is fundamentally good for people, not just in terms of their finances, but also their mental health as well. And I think there's a danger that if you set the UBI rate too high, that it would disincentivize employment. And I don't think that is materially or psychologically good.
100%. Ryan, thank you very much. It's great to have you on, and apologies for apparently serving up some kind of conspiratorial claptrap there, but I've got to be honest with you, that was just my initial hot take on the situation. Ryan Shorthouse there is the Chief Executive of the Liberal Conservative think tank Bright Blue. I'll tell you what, if you just gave everyone in the country 1,600 quid a month, just the real winners there are going to be drug dealers. I said it. I just said it. Right, there's less than 4 weeks to go until my date with Destiny. Yes, on Wednesday, June the 28th, I will dance on stage with the Dream Boys, who say they are the most famous group of male strippers. I'm doing it to raise money for the mental health charity Mind. And I am delighted to say, yes, that we have just gone past £56,000. We started this year, basically, you wonderful people have raised about £1,500 in an hour. So thank you, thank you, thank you. To everyone who's given money, you can donate now, justgiving.com/fundraising/Challenge Christys. That's justgiving.com/fundraising/Challenge Christys. In the coming weeks, I'm going to be doing a bit more to show what I'm actually doing to uphold my end of the bargain. But in a nutshell, I have lost 3 stone. I've stopped drinking, I've started eating a lot more healthy, and I've been doing all sorts. So I'm going to be doing a bit of a weight loss diary on all of this as well. So thank you very much, everybody. Up next is Michelle Dewberry with Jubes & Co., who has actually only just walked in. But what have we got on?
Oh, I've just been doing my stretching, my exercising, just so I feel as fit as you sat next to you. I've got loads coming up. I want to talk about universal basic income.
Yeah.
You're just going to create a nation of lazy so-and-sos dependent on the government. Lockdowns, Holly and Phil as well. What do people make of all that? And lots more as well.
Hey, all right, Jubes & Co. up next. Stay tuned. I'll see you tomorrow at 3.
Hello, it's Aidan McGibbon here with the latest GB News forecast from the Met Office. Warm, sunny spells once again for most of us this afternoon. Cloudier conditions, though, prevail along some east coast areas, and that's the result of high pressure being to the north of the UK. We've got this cool feed of air coming in around that high to bring suppressed temperatures to the east and some low cloud, whilst warm sunshine continues elsewhere. So a real contrast in temperatures during the afternoon. We'll continue to see that over the next few days. Overnight, as temperatures fall across the UK, the low cloud in the east will creep westwards. In fact, it becomes fairly widespread by the end of the night. The clearest places remain Northern Ireland, Western Scotland, North West England, West Wales and Cornwall, where a few mist patches are likely to form. But otherwise, extensive low cloud to begin Tuesday, grey skies for many. And it'll take some time through the morning for the sun to nibble away at the edges of that cloud, lifting and breaking it and pushing it back towards the east. But for the likes of eastern Scotland, Yorkshire, Lincolnshire, Norfolk, I think it will remain grey through the day with a chilly breeze from the North Sea, limiting temperatures to 13 Celsius at most. Warm sunshine elsewhere though, and low 20s more likely for parts of Wales and the southwest. Into the evening on Tuesday, well, we do it all again. Low cloud in the east, creeping westwards, becoming fairly widespread by the end of the night. And by dawn on Wednesday, most places are cloudy. But it stays clear for Northern Ireland, Western Scotland, North West England, West Wales, as well as Cornwall. And that's where the lowest temperatures will be on Wednesday morning. A cool feel first thing. But as the sun rises, well, it won't take long for those temperatures to rise.